The diversity of the student body is amazing because you get all sorts of different perspectives.
Almost any need or want that you have, you can find here.
There's that environment that fosters any kind of person you are.
Hopkins is the place to be.
I think the environment's really open.
The building's really nice. It's nice to have so many different random study areas.
Everyone's really smart.
Bloomberg is curious. Bloomberg is prestigious.
Bloomberg is fabulous.
It's collaborative, stimulating,
Ideal.
energetic, diverse.
Bloomberg is perfect.
Protecting lives, saving
Saving lives. I know the saving lives. Well,
billions. I think we should change to billions.
There's so much going on here that in the space of a short amount of time you can do so much.
Days are busy, a lot going on.
I would say that I'm never doing the same thing on a day-to-day basis.
There are always people here to help you, professors, advisors.
People think about things in a variety of ways here.
I've never seen a place where so many people just actually have good intentions.
There's always new ideas, and there's people who are really kind of the top-level thinkers, and I really like that.
Protecting health, saving lives, millions at a time.
Protecting health, saving lives, millions at a time.
Protecting health, saving lives, millions at a time.
Millions at a time.
Millions at a time.
Millions at a time.
I'm Mike Ward. I'm the Associate Dean of Student Affairs at the Bloomberg School of Public Health, and I'm here to welcome you to our Admitted Student Visitor Day. Before we get underway, I left my cell phone out so I didn't forget. If you can, please silence. Actually, if you could just please silence, or otherwise turn the sound off of your devices. This room is really incredible. I once heard when the Saints go marching in from the back row very clearly up front. It's built for sound. So, we're here today to welcome you, to give you the opportunity to see the school. But on a very serious level, all of you have come through a very rigorous admissions process. And some of you might think, maybe it wasn't that much, but it really was. There are a lot of people who are not sitting in the room right here, right now. A lot of talented people. And there are people in the room here today who may have applied a second time, may have taken the GRE or a second time or done whatever it might be. So I want to take a few seconds to congratulate you, but I want you to congratulate each other as well, because this is a very talented pool of people you're sitting with. So let's give a warm round of applause to all of you in the room. That may sound corny, but I started working with graduate students about 15 years ago, and it was a world of difference for me. It gave me more of my life back because I didn't get the 2 a.m. phone calls as dean of students. But more importantly, I noticed that graduate students sometimes don't want to celebrate their accomplishments and don't want to say, hey, we've done this or we've done that. And I think you should take that time because you're human just like everybody else, and human emotions are very important. But away from emotions for a second, I'm going to talk a little bit about Johns Hopkins University. I'm going to give you a little more background about what we're going to do today and introduce my colleague who's going to talk with you about the school as well. So if you can see from this first slide, I'm going to talk a little bit about university history here. 1876 opened the door, and it's a different type of university. I noticed that Hopkins literature has moved away from some of the traditional references to German culture or German institutions, but Hopkins was founded with German institutions in mind. Our first president at his installation talked about the encouragement of research and the advancement of individual scholars who by their excellence will advance sciences they pursue and society. And this really is in the German model of coming to follow a scholar, coming in to work with someone who's talented or skills that you can gain from. And why is this different from other schools? It really is truly different because at the core of many of other schools in our country is more of an English model where we're working on the whole person. There's a great balance. I'm not saying we don't do that work as well, but a lot of our core is about research, and following a scholar and gaining those skills. We also want to apply it to society. Don't get me wrong, that is a part, but it's inherent to our core and where we started in 1876 when no one else was doing that in the country. A little bit more about Johns Hopkins University. There are 3 major campuses here in Baltimore and 1 in Washington, D.C. and Montgomery County. We have facilities throughout Baltimore, Washington area, as well as facilities in China and Italy. I've always wanted the assignment to go to Bologna, but I haven't gotten it yet. It's coming, okay? The school is comprised of 9, or the university is comprised of 9 schools and divisions, and together with the university and the hospital, we're the state's largest employer. So as you look at institutions, there's a lot of power in finding internships, finding ways to collaborate, and finding different groups to work with. So I think that's something that really advantages us over many other institutions. Okay, so my real question is, I just want to see a show of hands. How many of you decided to come here in the summer or fall and you're going to enroll? How many? Just a show of hands. Oh my goodness. All right, we probably need to have our entire admissions team and a whole group of people here to talk to you. All right, more than just me. Okay, so this is your day. This is really your day. Why is this your day? Because this is your opportunity to see who we are. We're a very exciting school. We're a very vibrant school. And I always, when I first started here, and actually, to be candid with you, for 10 years I've been saying this, and this is really still true today. When I first started here, I would talk to people about their passions. I'm a liberal arts guy. I'm a higher ed guy. I am not public health trained. And I would talk to biologists about what they do, and as they started to light up and talk about their passions and talk about it, and I can tell you one of the people who really impressed me, Roger McMecken, talked about how groups and labs are teams and how team dynamic is so huge in at least doing this part because everyone has a role. And honesty and integrity in their work is so important. When you talk to people about hear what they do, I think you'll hear some fascinating things. I think you may find some interest you never knew you had. So you have a day here. I hope that you will take the tours, you'll talk to people, and you'll spend that time. You'll get a chance to see 3 lectures. It's only 3 lectures. The lectures and what happens here on a daily basis, if you ever just look to see what we offer, it's tremendous, and you're going to have to find ways when you come to limit yourself because there's so many different opportunities. As well, we'll have chances for you to talk to people about services and resources, and you'll have the chance to take a tour and you see what our state-of-the-art facilities are like. So I wish I could have everybody in the room at the end of the day. But again, how many of you coming? Let's just see. All right, congratulations on great decision making. And maybe you can help us with a few others here, okay? Okay, so I mentioned the seminar series. This is really important because this is really the core of what we're all about. You can see the 3 sessions here. Susan Sherman is going to talk about HIV prevention and economic empowerment. Sarah Blythe, who was actually, I think, on that first video, there's going to talk about obesity policy, and she's been a great ally in helping us become a better institution in terms of what we do in terms of workplace wellness. And Stan Becker is going to talk about population dynamics. And there are three talks. I know some of you may want to see 2. Some of you may want to see all 3, but there are lots of different talks and lots of different opportunities. But you can select one, and I hope you will enjoy. What's going on around campus? Okay, so let me just tell you, honestly, this was a month ago, or not a month ago, a week ago, I took a screenshot, or I just started copying and pasting off the web. What do we have in our news? What do we have in our press releases of recent? And you can see our gun center had just published some articles that got a lot of press. CCP, the communications programs out of Health, Behavior, and Society Department, was recently awarded for their groundbreaking work in terms of behavior change and social marketing in Mali. And 2 of our former deans were acknowledged. And you'll see a little bit, and you hear a little bit more about our former deans and some of these, so I don't want to get too far into it. And the thing that, I don't like to talk about a lot because I don't think, truthfully, most people don't. Some people see this as important, but we were recognized by U.S. News and World Report as the #1 school of public health. Is this, and some people right away say, oh, what standard is that? The truth of the matter is, the standard is what the people in this room think at the end of the day, okay? But it is nice to be recognized, don't get me wrong, okay? All right, so a little bit about our student organizations. You'll have an opportunity to hear more directly about this, but you can see this. There are a few. This is a sampling of groups. We have groups that work on obviously public health initiatives, some that are shared groups with medicine and nursing, and some university-wide groups. But we have 40 groups here that we recognize just within the school. And they come from flavors of cultural related to public health related. And if there's not a group doing the type of work you're interested in, there's always the opportunity to start one, okay? That's really the type of institution we are here. And as you could see, I think all of you probably have looked at your agenda. Next up on the agenda is my colleague, Laura Morlock, who's going to talk with us. Before she steps up, I want to tell you a little bit about Laura. Laura is, well, yeah, I think I'll go right to this. Okay, so Laura is professor in the Department of Health Policy and Management, and she's also Associate Dean for Education. She's trained as a sociologist, and her primary interests are in how organizational and managerial factors affect quality and cost of health care. Current projects that she's involved in include evaluations of a number of quality, improvement and patient safety initiatives, as well as work to implement and evaluate the Agency for Healthcare Research Quality funded National Incident Reporting System and intensive care units. She also participates in an evaluation team of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation on sponsored national collaboratives to improve the recognition and treatment of depression in 9 health plans. And sometimes you read these things and they don't sound very important, but in the news today we hear about how mental health issues have impacted that flight in the Alps. Currently, she's working with the National Association of Community Health Centers and evaluating leadership development programs and the sustainability and spread of chronic disease delivery models and patient safety with health center and outreach services. She's involved in various efforts in these centers. But I will say, one thing that I know about Dr. Morlock is that she is a great person to work with in terms of working with students and challenging as well as balancing that with nurture. The final thing I'll say is that her work with the Taiwan Department of Health has had a great impact on the school as well as Taiwan in terms of implementing a single payer system for the National Insurance Program. With no further ado, I'd like to welcome my colleague to the podium, our Associate Dean, Laura Morlock.
Mike, thanks so much. And I would also like to extend an extremely warm welcome to you and congratulate you again. We're so happy to welcome you here, and we'll try our very best to answer any of your questions that you may have today. I can imagine there are quite a few. So what I'd like to do is tell you a little bit about our school. First of all, it is a great time to be in public health. You probably already know this, but let me just say a couple of words about it. We get to look at society's most challenging problems. Obviously, we don't have the answers often, but we work together in interdisciplinary teams on some of the most challenging issues out there. There's a lot of interest in public health today. Every day there seems to be more in the news, more awareness of what public health is and the tools that public health has to offer. You will be joining a lot of very dedicated people. I guess it's also important to say there are jobs out there. And here's a little bit of data from the Department of Labor's Occupational Outlook Handbook. that these occupations will see expected job growth over the next 10 years. And these aren't the only areas in public health that are expected to grow. And this only takes into consideration opportunities in the U.S. There are a lot of international opportunities out there as well. And many of us, both faculty and students, work both on U.S. issues and on global issues. So what are some of the opportunities here at the school? I'd like to just spend a minute on our history. Mike has already talked a little bit about the university, so I'll be more specific to the school. We have a rich history. We started out as the Johns Hopkins School of Hygiene and Public Health, and Mike has already alluded a little bit to the German model. So hygiene is in the name because of our German tradition. That was the focus, the emphasis on research. But we had an equal focus in our school on practice, on the practical applications of what we were learning in the lab, in the field, and that came more from the British tradition. So we tried to unite these two ideas into one school, and that was in 1916. This was an important year. So we are 99 years old. Next year is going to be a really big deal for us. We're going to celebrate our 100th anniversary. It's like party. So, so it's going to be a really important, wonderful time to be here. In 2002, we had another name change. Because of our great benefactor, Michael Bloomberg, and his gifts, his interest, his devotion to the school, we became the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. We've always been international in scope. Our focus has always been on teaching, research, actually service, and mentorship. So let me say just a word about a couple of trailblazers here. There was Abel Woolman. Chlorinated water had its birth here at the university. The discovery that vitamin D could help in prevention of rickets had its origins right here in this building. There was Rachel Carson, closely associated with the school, who founded the environmental health, who really not founded so much as inspired the environmental health movement. There was the establishment in this very building of chronic disease epidemiology and everything that is done for us. Al Sommer really uncovered the power of vitamin A for its role not only in protecting eyesight, but actually protecting lives. There was Kirti Shah, still on the faculty, who linked HPV with cervical cancer for the first time. And we have a number of amazing alumni who have been leaders in the U.S. and around the globe. Just as some quick examples, we've had 3 directors of the Pan American Health Organization. In the U.S., we have had 2 U.S. Surgeon Generals. We've had 2 recipients of the U.S. Presidential Medal of Freedom, health ministers in many countries. The examples here are Peru, Thailand, India, New York City, very important, and Taiwan. We've had many other leaders. Our alums are a real powerful network of folks. We've had some very important deans. All our deans have been important, but I'll just mention a couple. D.A. Henderson, who is still very, very active on the faculty. Before he became dean, is credited with leading the effort to eradicate smallpox worldwide. You'll be introduced to him, hear lectures this summer from him. He's still very active, both globally and in the school. Al Sommer, our 9th dean, is also still very, very active on the faculty, has a new book, which he'll talk about this summer to you, on 10 lessons in public health. Our current dean, Michael Clagg, extends his greetings, wish he could be with you this morning. Here he is addressing the Chinese Dean's Forum. What we have done is brought together over the last few years on at least an annual basis all the schools of public health in China. And Mike helps them, runs kind of a dean's school. How do you be a dean of a school of public health? And that's been a really vibrant, exciting group to work with. We've changed a lot over the years, but one thing that really hasn't changed is our mission. It was and still is. We are dedicated to the education of a diverse global community of research scholars and public health professionals. So you can still see this very, very important duality which must work together to apply important knowledge. We're involved in the discovery, in the dissemination, and in the translation of knowledge to improve and protect health. And you've already heard a lot about our tagline here. So who are we today? Well, we usually have about 2,100 new and continuing students, and they are typically from around 80 to 90 countries. So you really can't imagine a more diverse place. We are the largest school of public health. And I should say that we graduate, for the last few years, we have graduated about 860 students in May each year. So it's entirely possible to get out of here. We can promise you that. Our faculty, we have over 600 full-time and over 760 part-time faculty. They author hundreds of peer-reviewed articles annually. There are, in addition to this number, about 300 joint appointments with other schools in the university. For example, at any one time, we have about 225 medical school faculty who are jointly appointed in the School of Public Health. And I should have mentioned back when I talked about our first dean, Dean Welsh, that he first of all was dean of the School of Medicine. Then he moved over here, crossed the street, and became dean of our school. So for 99 years, we've had a very, very close relationship and a lot of collaboration with the School of Medicine. On average, we have about one full-time professional faculty for every 2.7 master's students. We know you don't come in 0.7s. And for every 2 to 3 doctoral students. We're a global school. Any one time, we have ongoing projects in 80 to 90 countries. We have 10 academic departments, and I'm sure you're familiar with this because you've really looked us over before you applied. But we really are lab to field in our, and U.S. to global in all of our activities. We, in addition to the 10 departments, we have over 70 centers and institutes and lots of opportunities within those centers. We have various types of doctoral degrees, some research-oriented, some practice-oriented. We also have a number of different types of master's degrees, some research and some practice-oriented. Our largest single master's degree is the MPH, which is an 11-month program, as I'm sure you all know, with 80 term credits. That's a school-wide degree. I didn't mention this, but I think it's worth noting that we have over 500 courses. We also have some combined programs and certificates. For example, there's a concurrent program where you achieve a master's in biostatistics and a doctoral degree in another with another focus. We also have 20 different certificate programs, and many of our students participate in those programs, achieve a certificate as well as a degree while they are here. We have been a leader in online education. Of our more than 500 courses, more than 120 are online, and they are taken by both part-time and full-time students because it adds still more ability to have of various electives in your coursework. We have always, for a very long time, have focused on getting knowledge out there to whoever wants it. So we have a very big presence in what's called open courseware, and literally millions of hits on our site each year. And primarily these are courses that are available, the PowerPoint presentations of courses that are available free to anyone. More recently, we've become very involved in what are called MOOCs. Is everybody familiar with that? Massive open online courses. And so we offer a variety of courses now. They're free. The platform that we use is called Coursera, and there have been over 2 million enrollees within the last 18 months from all over the world in those courses. Don't want to stop here without talking about practice and service, and there'll be another presentation later from Source that is one of our organizations promoting linkages between students and community opportunities. If that didn't convince you, you'll hear more about Baltimore shortly. So I won't tell you what an interesting, fun place this can be. So I just feel like I need to mention again a couple of things. One is, this is just going to be a tremendous year next year to be here. It's going to be very exciting to help celebrate a centennial. We have all kinds of things planned. Globally, there's going to be 100 dinners, some in private homes, some in restaurants all over the world. I think the first one has already started in Peru. So that's just going to be fun. And what I'm hoping is that it'll serve as just one more incentive to help build our alumni network and connect current students to all the amazing alums that are out there. Mike already mentioned that we're very happy to be ranked #1 again. And what I want to do is tell you our secret. I feel we're #1 because we have the best students in the world. The very best thing about this school are your student colleagues. So look around and try hard to start getting acquainted today, because they are an amazing, powerful resource. So public health is an adventure. We sure hope you come join us. Thanks.
Hi, everybody. We are actually waiting for our next presenter, so I'm going to, she's one of our current students, and as everybody's been saying, our students are busy, and so she just got caught up on something, so she called me. She's on her way. But we did want to give an opportunity, just why we have some deans here. If anybody, I know it's early and you have probably a ton of questions, but if anybody has any questions right now, we can start answering just for a few minutes before Tara gets here. And I also am curious to see who came the farthest. It's always just a fun game for me. So who did come the farthest? If you think you did? Where'd you come from? San Diego. Uh-oh.
You're being challenged.
Yeah, you're being challenged. Columbia? Oh, a hand went down. Well, wonderful. And I know everybody's from everywhere, and you've all made trips, whether you're coming from Delaware or D.C. Or from Columbia. So we're really happy that you're here. And I guess I should introduce myself as well. I'm Leslie Vink. I'm the Director of Recruitment and Events here at the school and Admission Services. And I'd also like to point out my counterpart, Taryn Maloney. She's our Assistant Director. She and I will be running around like crazy today with you, and you'll see a lot of us. So if you have any questions or you need help finding a room or anything like that, just find one of us or any of our staff members who have little badges. We're happy to help you. So does anybody have any questions real quick before we, the gentleman from Columbia.
My name is Jorge. I'm from Colombia. So my question is about like the ranking. Which are the factors?
That's a good question. I'm repeating the questions because we are recording this. The question is about the rankings and what are the factors in determining those rankings?
You know, that's why you point out what are the factors. There's several factors that apply to the rankings. One is retention rate. Probably biggest factor is people in the field evaluate and answer surveys. So deans at all the schools get a survey and answer the question of which schools do you think are best and why. So that's considered. I know there are other factors in terms of graduation rates that are looked at, but I think the survey of deans is probably the biggest factor. When I was talking about it and I made reference to it, I'd like to be really clear that it's not necessarily the best evaluation. The best evaluation is going to be what is the fit for you as a student, from my perspective. So that's it. I don't know if Laura wants to jump in as well, but I know the dean survey is probably one of the bigger factors.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And so, you know, you can really question that methodology, but I think the most important part of it is this basically peer evaluation. There are over 50 schools of public health, and they each get 3. The leadership of those schools get 3 surveys, and rank, you know, the schools. So we try not to make too much of it because we've got some really terrific competition out there. You know, there's a lot of good schools of public health, and we try to work very closely with them, and we try to learn what we can from them. In fact, we just all met together this week, the schools and the programs of public health. We were at meetings in Washington trying to understand best practices. It was a great week. There was one other thing that I wanted to say. I can see I could understand if you had some concern that we're so big. You know, is it possible that you're just going to get lost here? And I really want to emphasize that this is an easy place to find colleagues, people who are interested in what you're interested in. It's an easy place to find other students and faculty, you know, who really care about what you care about. So it's an easy place to connect. That said, I think it's a real challenge sometimes because there's a lot of riches here. And whatever it is you think you're interested in, you know, the advice I'd have to offer is allow yourself to be open enough to discover new things because there's so much going on. There'll be things that you never really thought about, but that you could get really interested in. So that there is a real challenge there, that there's so much you're going to want to do that sometimes it's hard to decide. Sorry for the long answer.
Let me get one quick word in, and our the person whose time it really is now here. Tara's here. Oh, but one other quick factor, we would love to be evaluated on research dollars or depth or breadth for schools of public health. Those aren't the measures, but we've been a leader in terms of federal funding. I think we have much more funding than what you'll see at many other schools in terms of research. So I'm going to let that question go, but I'm glad to answer more questions. I'll be here afterwards. So
Okay, so Jorge came the farthest, and he gets the one question right now. We'll have plenty of other opportunities throughout the day to answer your questions. We have a student panel, so we'll be able to, and that's what this day is designed for. So Tara's here. You saw her scoot across the stage, and I have the great pleasure of introducing her. Her name is Tara Kirksell. She's a PhD candidate in the Department of Health Policy and Management and recipient of the prestigious Hopkins Sommer Scholarship. Tara grew up encouraged by her parents to be the person on the field rather than the person cheering from the sidelines. This is a lesson she has certainly carried with her and is truly living. As a competitive swimmer, Tara earned an athletic scholarship to Stanford University and went on to win a silver medal at the 2004 Olympic Games in Athens. It's all I had in me to not play the Olympic song when we were here, but I didn't. Her experiences as an athlete and as an elite and professional athlete taught her the importance, balance, and integration of competition and teamwork. After retiring from swimming in 2009, Tara took a job at the Center for Biosecurity for UPMC, where she worked toward protecting people's health from the consequences of epidemics and disasters, and ensuring that communities are resilient in the face of major challenges. This work, along with D.A. Henderson and other experts in the field of health security, eventually led her to her current path. Tara's dissertation will explore public policy responses to emerging epidemics, specifically how the media and policy intertwine in the case of Ebola and the health consequences of these policy actions. She believes that public health must have a seat at the table when decisions regarding disaster preparedness are made, and she plans to help make that happen. Tara's dedication and passion for the field of public health are contagious, and we're happy that she's here to speak with you today. Please join me in welcoming her to the podium.
All right, well, first off, I apologize for being a little bit late. I had one of those mornings where you show up in your office and you're checking your email and you're just like, oh my goodness. I was supposed to be somewhere quite a while ago. So I actually am not very good on land, but I did break out the jog and actually sprint up the hill to get here. So anyway, so I think that I have kind of a strange story on how I got here, but I think that many people in the audience could really sort of have the same sort of winding way of how they got to public health and how they got, hopefully, to Hopkins. But to tell this story, I think I need to go back a little bit from, you know, the nice waving world record picture and kind of start back and tell a story that's a little bit about taking your tragedies and making them into opportunities, and also taking a look at your options and not being able to, or not being afraid to choose the best among your options. I think sometimes people sell themselves short and try to choose something that's safe and don't really go for really the best thing that's out there. So anyways, when I was younger, I was the nerdy sister, and my younger sister actually was the great swimmer. And I went to nerd camp, and she went to Stanford Swim Camp, and I, went to the CTY camp, which is actually based out of Hopkins. But, I never thought that I would be a great swimmer. And I was actually into gymnastics as my sport, although I was not particularly good at gymnastics. And to prove that, I was in a gymnastics meet, and I made a mistake and crashed headfirst into the ground and broke my arm and had nerve damage, and that was the end of my gymnastics career. And so I started swimming with my sister as sort of like rehab, because I couldn't move my hand very well, and so I started swimming. And really, I was sad to leave gymnastics behind and start this sport that I was not that good at, and also my sister was much better than me. So that's also, takes a hit to the ego, especially when it's a younger sister. But anyway, so, I started swimming, got a little better, but still wasn't that great. And I remember my sophomore year, we were sitting around the dinner table, and my mom said, Tara's sending out all these information sheets to colleges, and, wouldn't it be so funny if she got a scholarship to Stanford? It was a joke. It was really a joke that everyone laughed. But really, I started working, and I got a lot better. And, lo and behold, my senior year, I started getting calls from coaches, including the Stanford coach. And so I ended up at Stanford. Well, actually, no, I need to back up because this is one of the themes. Because, you know, I had a lot of different colleges that were asking me to come out to join them. And, you know, Stanford was among them. And I thought, you know what? Stanford is the best at swimming and has really great academics. Why wouldn't I go there? This isn't a story about how great Stanford is, because we're at Hopkins right now. But it was one of those things where I said, you know what? Why don't I just decide, you know, maybe I am not the, you know, it's not a slam dunk that I absolutely know that I should be here, but this is a great opportunity for me to go where I can have the best opportunity for athletics, and I can have a really great opportunity for my academics. And so that's what I chose, and it turned out great because I went there and had a great coach who helped me make the Olympic team, and who, you know, where I also got a great academic background that allowed me to also apply here and get in here for my grad school. So anyways, that's the story of sort of how I got into swimming, how I got to elite level swimming. But, you know, there's more between that. Obviously, here's a little timeline. I didn't make this timeline. It got made for the summer scholarship thing, and I just like cut and pasted it on here. But I was like, okay, this works perfectly. But, you know, like I got married, I had a kid, like all kinds of things happen in life on your way to the things that you do. So, but anyways, at one point in my career, I was working at the UPMC Center for Health Security, and I said, you know what, I really need to get a terminal degree. I really need to do this for my career. It's something that, you know, I'm really missing, and I need to think about, you know, where I'm going to go next. So I looked at the schools of public health. I was interested in public health. The UPMC Center for Health Security is a very public health-oriented workplace, and that was the field that I was in. And it also had this great benefit of being founded by that man right there. Does anyone know who that is? His name is D.A. Henderson, and he is the person who led the smallpox eradication program. He is a former dean of this school and a hero to many of us in public health. And so I was working with him and spoke with him, and he was like, why wouldn't you just go to Hopkins? It's the best place around. And I was like, huh, that's a good point. Thanks, DA. You're very wise. And so, you know, I came, obviously Hopkins is the best, so, you know, I came to look at Hopkins. And the other thing I did was I spoke to a lot of different professors here. And before I came here and said, you know, is this really a good fit for me? Is this the place that I want to be? What department do I want to be in? And, you know, what kind of faculty do we have here? And really, I have to say that it's one of the best faculties around. Like, these people really do care about the students, and they care about your success, and they care about your learning. And so, you know, I got to have a great, this is the most recent picture over here. I had a great trip with one of the people who teaches classes here. His name is Dan Morheim, and he is actually also a delegate in the Maryland legislature, and he took us out, and we got to sort of have a day sort of shadowing him around. On the lower picture, that's Tom Burke. He was my advisor. He recently left to be the chief science advisor at the EPA. And then over here is the Somer Scholar class, and here's former Dean Somer and Bill Ward also on there. So great faculty that we get to work with, you know, every day. And really, the other thing is that these faculty, they won't be in your face. So you have to actually, this is my tip, if you're going to access these faculty, you actually have to go to the effort of meeting them, talking to them, and you know, interacting with them, doing some research with them, and not just say at the end of the year, say, hey, I took a class from you. I don't know if you remember me, but can you write me a recommendation? Like, that's not the way to do it. The real way to do it is to engage. The other thing that I love about Hopkins is, you know, the amazing students that are here. And here's some collections of you know, some of the fun events that I got to do with different students, like birthday parties. This bottom one, we didn't know that sign was there, but it was after the end of our qualifying exams, so it was sort of perfect there. And then this is at was it the Senate building? Yeah, it was at one of the Senate buildings because we were, you know, there to support our advisor when he was speaking in front of one of the Senate committees. And then, you know, one of my classmates got married, so that's all of us over there. So we get to work with great students here at Hopkins, and we get to not only be friends with them, but I think the other thing that I take advantage of with the other students is I say, here's my research project. Here's a problem that I've come across. Megan, this tall girl in the black, Megan, what should I do? Seriously, I need some help. And she usually comes up with an answer or directs me to another student who's had that same problem and helps me sort of work through it in my research, which is definitely helpful. And then finally, I want to say a few things about Baltimore and say, some people say that it's a little bit scary. It might be like The Wire, but I haven't really found that to be the case. I have fun times at the ballpark, and I eat hot dogs covered in macaroni and cheese and crab. So, which is definitely, you got to do it. You got to try it. But the Inner Harbor is great, and so I really am happy here at Baltimore and at Hopkins, and so that's really sort of the story of how I got here. I guess I left out a bit of my story, which is kind of like another, I hesitate to end on this, but I forgot it. It's an important part of this whole theme. But, I swam for a long time, and then I finally made the Olympic team in 2004, and I missed the Olympic team by 100th of a second in 2008. And it was really sad. And then one of the girls who beat me tested positive for clenbuterol, and then that was even sadder. And I didn't get put on the team, and so I was like, oh, this really sucks. But it's one of those tragedies turning into opportunities. I said, well, I think I'm going to retire from swimming. What am I going to do with my life? And this is another lesson, networking. So my husband's former college roommate's dad said, why don't you call someone at the Center for Health Security and just ask them what you should do with your life? And and so I did, and then I got a job, and I moved to Baltimore. So that's how that worked out. So anyway, so it's there are times, and this is all like the winding road. This is the winding road of my talk right now too. But this winding road of how you get from one place to the next. And I think that you just have to be sort of open to the opportunities that come along as you sort of follow that winding road of your career and life and whatever. And know that it's not always going to go great, but that if you're ready to choose the best opportunity you have out there, Hopkins, it's going to be great. So, okay, that's all I have, I think. Yep, that's all I have. I can take a few questions from you if you have any. Or wait, are we moving on? I'm a little bit over. 2 minutes.
One question.
Okay, middle person, right there.
You said that you wanted a terminal degree. How did you decide on what program and a PhD versus an MPH or another degree that was offered?
So,
Can you repeat the question?
okay. So the question is, I said that I needed a terminal degree, and how did I decide on what department, and if it was an MPH or a PhD, and there's also a DRPH that's offered here. So I was personally, I already have a master's degree from Stanford, and so I wasn't really looking at master's degrees. Although the advantage of if you want to go on to a PhD from here and you get an MPH, a lot of the requirements are the same, so you can save some time there. So the way that I chose the department, and it was kind of tricky because, like everyone, it's all great, and you could sort of make your life fit into whatever department you go to. But I talked to a lot of different people. I talked to, I think, 9 different faculty members, and sort of just, and they're pretty generous with their time, and were willing to meet with me for half an hour and talk about what kind of stuff they do in their department and the type of work that their students do, and the type of dissertations that people end up doing in their department. And so I spoke with a lot of them and didn't really find a great fit until I spoke with Tom Burke, who and he was in HPM, which isn't what I am now. And he was talking about the policy focus of the department, and that was really what I was interested in. So I was looking for a match in topic area, but I think the other thing that I didn't know that I was looking for until I had met Tom Burke was that I was looking for a good mentor. And so I found that in Tom Burke. And so I think that the subject matter matters, but so do the people that you're working with. And so you have to find find good people to work with that you want to work with. I mean, there's good people all over, but not everyone gets along. So you have to find good people to work with, and that's what I ended up finding. That's how I ended up in HPM. All right, so thanks so much for listening.
Thanks, Tara. All right, so we're getting ready to do our Bloomberg seminar series. I know Mike Ward kind of went over the different presentations. I just want to kind of give you the logistics for them. Susan Sherman with our Department of Epidemiology, Economic Empowerment as HIV Prevention, what's money got to do with it, will be in this room. And then right across the hall is our Becton Dickinson room in W1020. That'll be Sarah Bleish talking about obesity policy, one example of a success. And then Stan Becker with our Department of Population, Family, Reproductive Health will be in Anna Bacher room. And that's if you make a right out of this room, you're going to go to a T and then make a left down the hallway. We have signs and staff that'll help you get there. It's not hard though. So we're going to go to those sessions. You do have to pick one. I wish we had more time to give you more opportunities from everybody. But we will be back in this room then at 11 o'clock to finish our group presentations as well. So enjoy the Bloomberg seminar series. All right, everyone. We're going to get started so we can give Susan the amount of time she needs. I get to introduce Dr. Susan Sherman, who will be presenting this morning's seminar. Dr. Sherman received her MPH from the University of North Carolina and a PhD from the Bloomberg School of Public Health. Dr. Sherman is a professor in our Department of Epidemiology who focuses on improving the health of marginalized populations, particularly that of drug users and sex workers. Her research among drug users has largely focused on harm reduction, HIV prevention, economic development, and overdose prevention and response. She has been involved in several large, randomized peer outreach intervention trials and has aimed to reduce HIV and related risk behaviors among drug users in Thailand, Baltimore, and Pakistan. She is also working to examine the effects of economic empowerment on reducing sexual risk behaviors among sex workers in India. She utilizes both qualitative and quantitative methodologies. She is also interested in the relationship between gender norms and sexual risk behaviors among adolescents. So without further delay, please welcome Susan to the podium.
Thank you. How many people know what harm reduction is? What is it? Someone say. It's kind of the cornerstone of my work. What is it? I'm not going to call on you the whole time.
Exactly. I just have like an idea. It's developing like ways to, I don't know exactly.
Someone else. It's okay. Yeah.
I guess not eliminating an issue completely, but seeking to reduce harm, not to use the same words.
No. Right. So I'll just say before I start, I am not in the business of saving anyone. It's not my job. My job, I really feel, is to provide options to people. So harm reduction is meeting people where they are, believing that there have always been drug users, there will always be drug users, there have always been sex workers, there probably will always be sex workers, and being interested in them wherever they are in the continuum of their addiction, their work, etc. So you'll leave remembering that. I don't know why I just pulled it out because Leslie said it, but I mean, I just think it's really important. I'm about to give you examples of some interventions that I've done with sex workers, and I always give this story. This student came in my office and said, I think it's so great that you want to save these women. I'm like, I don't save, I'm not saving these women. Women really need, a lot of people don't have the tools that you all have been provided in your life and that I've been provided to make different choices so. All right, so economic empowerment is HIV prevention. What does money have to do with it? So I want to start this talk just by giving some myths about sex workers so we all kind of have the same leveling playing field. All sex workers are women. Sex workers are women, girls, boys, transgender men. All sex workers are single. Sex workers are partnered, they're married, they're not necessarily single. Sometimes their partners do and don't know what they do. Sometimes their partners are very well aware and take the money that they make every night. Most sex workers don't want children and try to avoid pregnancy. This is definitely not true. They may try to avoid pregnancy with clients, but many sex workers are mothers. And in the work we did in India, a lot of the sex workers who were sex work, part of it was to pay school fees, to clothe and feed their children, etc. All sex workers are trafficked. I could give a whole lecture on this. Of course, there are many trafficked women and boys and girls. It's a horrible reality. But unfortunately, there's been some conflation of volitional sex work and trafficking, so people think it's all together. And why that's important is because I would say that part of how women are trafficked and men into sex work is lack of opportunities, poverty, low self-esteem, high rates of, sexual victimization as children, not believing they can do anything else. So to me, those are some of the biggest drivers of the women that we work of sex work, not that anyone is necessarily trafficking them. Although there are a lot of, controlling men who take money from them, et cetera. Some of the recent work I've done with exotic dance clubs, lots of the women don't even know what they make because they hand it over to the guy, their boyfriend that they live with. Sex work is not work. And if you notice, I'm not using the term commercial sex workers. I'm not a commercial professor. The truck driver is not a commercial truck driver. Sex work is work. In 2006, the International Labor Organization actually recognized sex work as work. And it's important because it's really a different orientation how you approach women if you're actually approaching them as workers who have occupational rights. In Brazil, they're unionized, and they actually are afforded, and in Australia, and other countries, they're afforded all the rights of someone who are in a given field. They have labor bargaining rights, and et cetera. So that's a really different connotation than when you think of kind of a street commercial sex worker or a prostitute, if that makes sense. Sex work is without thinking of them as a worker. Sex work is illegal, and therefore programs cannot be implemented. And hopefully over the next 54 minutes, less than that, 44 minutes, you'll understand that, of course, we can implement programs. No matter, like I said, where they are on the continuum. How many people have done work with sex workers or drug users? Where have you?
I was in Singapore.
That's okay. That's okay.
I was doing research actually with domestic workers in Singapore, but there's a lot of crossovers.
Yeah.
There's a huge problem with trafficking of domestic workers.
Where did they come from?
Mostly from Philippines and Indonesia.
Yep.
So,
Everywhere. Nails, nannies, domestic workers, Filipino women.
It's the same issue with defining workers as workers.
Interesting. What about you behind?
I'm on a study where we're working with sex workers in Boston and Providence. They're MS sex offend. And then the thing I guess we're probably going to obviously talk about it, but there's like a drop-in center in Providence for male sex workers and stuff. And like they've been funded by the Rhode Island Department. Well, money got cut, but I mean they were funded and things like that. So we're looking into like their sexual networks and their substance abuse networks.
Great. Do you work with Ken Mayer?
Yeah.
Great. Anyone else? Yes.
As a case manager for San Francisco County Mental Health,
Great. I used to live there. Are you moving from there to Baltimore? Don't say that. We can talk. It did take me a year to not say when people are like, oh, where do you live? San Francisco always was in my sentence for the first year, but everyone made me get over it. Okay. So let's look a little bit about, since the beginning of the epidemic, 30 years into the HIV epidemic, older than some of you are, which is kind of phenomenal to think, sex workers have been a part of the story. Unfortunately, and the prevalence, they were a part in Thailand. They were like, I don't know if people are familiar with the 100% condom campaign. In India, they had upwards of 30 to 50% HIV prevalence. So there were lots of big interventions, structural interventions, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what that is, that targeted sex workers. But still, in 33 countries, there is HIV among sex workers still to this day. And this is an article that was led by Steph Barral in The Lancet. Lots of people, Chris Spire, myself, Deanna Kerrigan, Michelle Decker, faculty in the School of Public Health. Some of those names you might know. We're on this paper where we actually looked at those 33 countries, and we looked at the prevalence among sex workers in low and middle income countries only of HIV in this 4-year period. And the pool odds ratio of infection of sex workers compared to similar age women was almost 14%. And this number, as soon as this came out, I can't tell you the hits that this got and how many times it's been cited, because it's just pretty incredible that 30 years into this epidemic, when there have been programming focusing on sex workers, still these rates are so high and persist. And Why that's still the case is a whole nother lecture, but this is just to give you the current epidemiological landscape in low and middle income countries. So we know that the direct risk, like the risk of HIV in any population besides transfusion injection drug users, but the sexual risk is a condom's not involved, barriers aren't involved, right? But I posit, and many other people posit, there are a number of reasons why people's ability to protect themselves are compromised. And I and others really look at a broader context, multi-leveled, complex, synergistic context of why the factors that prohibit people from protecting themselves. When I'm high, I don't always use condoms. I'm afraid to be HIV tested. I don't feel comfortable talking to my doctor. If doctors don't know that the true nature of their patient's risk, they can't really counsel them appropriately. People, still to this day, people don't get AIDS testing. And in Baltimore, there's a big effort about getting tested and getting people into treatment. I mean, getting people tested is a huge effort paid by the CDC and the NIH research portfolio because people are still not getting tested. My partner beats me, there's no way to use a condom. And of course, beating or sexual violence is the most egregious form of physical sexual violence, but there's a whole continuum of why someone may not feel comfortable asking their partner to use a condom. Their partner might think that means they're messing around. It may think that they don't trust them. If their partner's having an affair, it may make them feel the woman in their life has found that out or something. But there are lots of reasons. It may not be the norm that the woman requests such things, like their sexual negotiation. She's not really the one who's driving behavior such as condom use. So there are lots of other factors. A body of work that I'm not going to talk about today, I almost did, is work with the police. I don't know if people know, but there have been and we're about to start a big study with police, so if you do come here and you're interested, you should talk to us, looking at the police's role in sex workers' risk environment. But they're confiscating condoms and using them as evidence in lots of jurisdictions in the U.S. and elsewhere. 3 condoms were evidence of sex work if a woman was carrying them. It's illegal in New York now. That doesn't happen. Prosecutors don't use that as evidence. It's not admissible in San Francisco. But still, there's an effect that if it happens that people know that once was illegal or that it was grounds for women being arrested, they may not carry condoms, right? So that has had long-term effects. We hadn't found that to be true in Baltimore, that was used. Okay, so you get the point, right? That there are a broader array of factors besides just not using a condom. All right, so HIV risk even though I'm talking about these broader contextual or structural drivers, the predominance of HIV research for all populations really up until the past 10 years were very individually focused, devoid of all of these contextual factors. And although condoms is really important, it doesn't really hit the whole picture. And there's so many things that lead to that moment of being safe. The study I recently did with exotic dancers for the last few years, and we've worked with exotic dancers in Baltimore for a while. There are clusters of dance clubs that actually function as brothels. The women don't negotiate for the pay, the bartender does, so the only negotiation she has is for a tip, and depending on what money she needs or how threatened she feels, in terms of the kind of HIV STI risk profile of the person, she may decide to have sex without a condom or be more compromised in her behavior so that she gets a bigger tip. Lots of condoms are used in that context, but still, condoms are something that are important, but obviously that payment structure, the fact that she doesn't negotiate directly, influences that act of safety, if that makes sense. All right, so in the mid-2000s, I started to think, what is one of the things that would really cut women's risk at their source, and that was income. That so many women's I had a study of young drug users, injectors and non-injectors in an area of Baltimore, southwest Baltimore, and a lot of the young women we saw, there was so much economic dependence on their partner for drugs. Their partners shot them up, which it elevates your risk if you don't inject yourself. And so the financial underpinnings felt like it was driving a lot of women's risk. So I'm going to talk a little bit about those interventions. So it's really important, of course. I'm not saying that you shouldn't focus on condoms, but if anyone works in the world of HIV, comprehensive HIV prevention is really the norm of today, that you're not just focusing on that, although for the first 20 years that was a lot of the focus. All right. So to give a definition of what structural determinants, that really informs a large body of my work at this time with drug users and most notably sex workers, mostly women who sell sex and use drugs. They are the contextual factors that include social, political, economic, policy, legal, and cultural factors that shape patterns of transmission and acquisition as well as consequences of HIV. So it's from the laws, the fact that sex work is illegal in Baltimore and women have limited negotiating power, even not just with the person in these exotic dance clubs, for example, that they're having sex with, but the payment system, how the bartender pays them for whatever they do. I mean, where sex work is criminalized, women really are compromised in a number of ways. In the immediate environments in which they sell sex, in this case I'm mentioning exotic dance clubs, or with the police, for example, because they really aren't, they don't have any legal rights as their work would provide in other places. So this framework was developed by Kate Shannon, and it's just to show you that although in the world there have been a lot of kind of interventions that have targeted broader factors like programmatic research. So in Thailand there was a 100% condom campaign that I mentioned where all brothels were mandated condoms be used, and this was a partnership between the Ministry of Public Health, the police, and the brothels, and that was in the mid-90s. So that's a good example of a structural intervention where they literally changed the norms around condoms were always used with sex workers, and that there was a fine if men went to an STI clinic and they reported what brothel they'd been to, the brothel would be fined and eventually closed. So there was an enforcement mechanism. So that's a great example of a structural intervention from the field. It took a little while for social scientists to kind of catch up. Late 90s, people really started talking San Francisco, the bathhouses, policy in the bathhouses is another great example of kind of looking at broader contextual factors. But it still didn't become the norm in HIV prevention programming and research that was funded to look at housing or these venues, et cetera. So this is something that Kate Shannon put forward actually in 2014, specifically focusing on sex workers. And in talking about acquisition and transmission dynamics of HIV, she talks about the influences of people's partners, their dyads, which I've mentioned, their work environments, which I've talked about a little bit. Positive influence, are they organized? Do they act as collectively? Do street-based sex workers have a system where they let each other know about bad dates, for example? So that level of organization really acts as a buffer to risk in their lives from violence and STIs and HIV. What kinds of economic opportunities, which is what I'm going to focus on, that why women are in sex work in the first place, or how empowered they even feel as sex workers. And then obviously broader macro structural factors such as the criminalization of sex work, broad stigma that people aren't going to talk to their doctors or seek services, et cetera. Does anyone have any comments or questions at this point? Okay. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the work that I've done in intervening on this economic domain. I think it's always important to say, besides like my spiel on I don't save people for a living, I think it's important to say that, for a lot of these people, they are surviving and they are coping. So we as epidemiologists, social scientists, behavioral scientists talk about risk factors. All of our models model risk. We don't often talk about the flip side of protective factors. How are some people in this environment actually keeping themselves safe, who may have the same set of circumstances as someone else who's risky? So although I'm about to kind of launch into more of a risk framework, I really respect that people make the choices they have to in the moment. And in the moment, you're not worried about a disease that's going to affect you in maybe 10 years, if you live that long, when you maybe are starting to feel sick because you need heroin, or you need money to pay your rent, or to pay your child's school fees, etc. All right, so this is risky to show you this. How many people live in Baltimore now? 3 of you. Okay. How many people had visited Baltimore before today? Okay. How many people have watched The Wire? Less than have visited. So this, of course, this is taken from Federal Hill, a great neighborhood near the water where I had lived at one time. So this is Baltimore. This beautiful building is Baltimore. But this, of course, also is Baltimore. It's also New Haven. I mean, it's everywhere in the United States, right? Where there are vacant housing, where you have the center of housing that looks like this and doesn't have any green space and doesn't have any vegetation. Obviously, it's winter, so it's not green, but you can see there probably aren't necessarily gardens around here. So Baltimore, I'll tell you, if you do come here, and it's, you know, there are many reasons to come to this institution, I hope you keep your eyes open and see the good and the bad, because, you know, you only can appreciate the good if you understand the bad as well. And for people that are interested in domestic work, there's so many opportunities here. I've always done domestic and international until now I have young children, so I am mostly domestic at this moment in my life, but there are lots of opportunities in both. So in terms of the socioeconomic context of Baltimore, this looks at unemployment rates comparing Maryland, which has relatively low unemployment, the green line, to the United States, which actually has slightly higher. You know, Maryland's a relatively wealthy state, and probably if you took Baltimore out of it, that line would be a lot lower. And then Baltimore consistently has higher rates of unemployment as an indicator of economic well-being than the rest of Maryland and the rest of the United States. Unemployment is roughly, now, you know, unemployment is 11%. I'm sure you know that that is really it doesn't really belie how many people are not working, because you have to be seeking work, right, to be counted as unemployment. I can't think of the word I'm looking at. The truer indicator is there are a third of the population that could be working is not in the workforce. High percentage of households well under poverty, under 25,000, which is well over poverty, but there are 20% of households are in poverty, and almost a third of the population has less than a high school education. So obviously, this is not distributed equally across the city, for sure. In this building, it's not like that. The neighborhood I live in Baltimore City, it's not like that. But there are just incredible concentrations of poverty in large parts of the city. And in terms of the risks of what I'm about to talk to you about, this economic intervention we did in Baltimore, there's an economic context. People have limited opportunities. There are barriers to employment, like they don't have high levels of education. Drug use becomes a barrier to employment. You know, there's some people that getting up regularly and being able to dress appropriately, or calling if you're going to miss work or if you have missed work, these are huge barriers for an incredible segment of the population, things that we take advantage of, kind of basic politeness and how you act in that environment. People actually aren't necessarily trained in that if their parents weren't working and they didn't see that as the norm. And then, of course, that moves you to the very healthy economy in Baltimore of drugs. Baltimore has been known for a very long time, from jazz days, Billie Holiday on, as a heroin town. The face of heroin is different than Billie Holiday at this point. Crack cocaine, prescription pills, which is everywhere. So then there are lots of employment opportunities in that then put you at greater risk for HIV, for being incarcerated, for further drug use. So there really is kind of this spiral, if interventions don't happen, downstream, providing people opportunities. Now, training women to mark, make it, and sell beading jewelry is not going to take them out of it. Doesn't save their life necessarily, but you'll see that it's the beginning of people kind of changing their notion of themselves, their self-esteem, their ability to engage in illicit employment scheme that people actually buy and appreciate. That's the beginning of the process of changing people's life, not just their risk behaviors, but also their I can't get the words out, their notion of themselves and what they think that they can do, and potentially informing their idea about other employment opportunities. So Jewel, in 2007, this was like 2004 or 5, it stood for Jewelry Education for Women Empowering Their Lives. It was a small pilot study funded by NIDA. This is actually a jewelry sale that happened in we have really great markets, Saturday and Sunday markets in Baltimore, fresh food markets, and we had a stand there. So the goal of Jewel was to assess the feasibility of training drug-using women to make, market, and sell beaded jewelry, to look at jewelry's effects on their self-efficacy around obtaining a job, and also to look at the effects on their HIV risk-taking behaviors. This was a supplement to that study that I mentioned of looking at HIV risks and transition to injection among new young injectors and non-injectors. So why jewelry making? Has anyone ever made jewelry? Oh, I appreciate there's always one guy who admits. Really? 5 people? Raise your hand higher. Okay. How long does it take you to make a necklace? Not a complicated necklace. Not long. 20 minutes? An hour for a more complicated necklace, maybe, if you're like doing crocheting. So everybody wears jewelry. I mean, probably many people in this room have on jewelry. I like jewelry. And the startup costs are really expensive. It's pretty easy to learn. There are lots of different levels of jewelry making, but you can still sell a necklace that can take you 20 minutes to make. And it doesn't take long, as I started with, to make the product. As an aside, I'll tell you that I used to make jewelry, and I actually, at one point, a long time ago, had my stuff in like 15 stores. And so people used to joke, "Why don't you train women to make jewelry, in your study?" I'm like, "Are you kidding? There'd be beads all over Southwest Baltimore." And it was a big conflict of interest that, I'm training women to make jewelry while I'm actually selling jewelry. So as my business was winding down, one of the women in the picture before actually was a MPH student, and I jokingly said after giving a lecture, "Does anyone know how to make jewelry?" And she was much more skilled than I was, and so she actually became one of our 2 teachers to these women. So hobbies can actually inform your work, which was something I never would have thought of. So Jewel was an intervention. There were 72 women that were in it. They enrolled in the study. We baselined them, and then they came. There were 6 cohorts of these interventions. They were 6 sessions where we started with HIV prevention. We kind of tried at first to do jewelry making in the morning, but people left. So we wanted to do and it was really interactive and fun. I mean, I've designed interventions for street kids in Pakistan, methamphetamine users in Thailand, sex workers in India, I'm going to talk about. So we definitely have learned how to design engaging and fun, and people are really interested about the information. It was funny, the thing that people were most interested in, they had never seen Fielmont condoms, which you can get for free from the state, and there were a lot of conversations. That notion of being able to use a condom yourself and not have to ask someone else to use it was amazing to watch how empowering that was for people and kind of change their notion of that sexual negotiation with their clients. So we taught them how to make jewelry. The 4th session was actually more jewelry making and marketing. I'll tell you that these women knew a lot more about marketing than we did, but we were galvanizing the marketing skills for a sale that we had in the outpatient center. So every cohort had a sale, and if you had graduated from a previous cohort, your jewelry could still sell in that sale. We had open jewelry making sessions every Wednesday, and we always had an average of 5 women at those sessions. We happened to have this intervention it occurred during a cold winter. We had food, we had coffee, we had a warm space, so that definitely helps. Even if it had been hot, I mean, I think people would have come regardless, but that definitely was a plus. Okay, so in terms of who these women were, they were almost 2/3 African American. I'll say that we recruited from one particular area of town, Southwest Baltimore, which actually is in the quadrant of Baltimore where The Wire was filmed and The Corner was filmed and the book was written about. High drug activity, black, white, lots of sex workers, black, white. So it's not just African Americans, but we recruited almost 2/3 African American. 1/3, so very low levels of education. Their median age was older, much older than the parent study. The cap on that study was 25. Young women were just not interested in this. They could make a lot more money out on the street doing their thing, and they did not want to sit around in a very kind of modern day sewing circle, I always say, and hang out with older women and make jewelry. That was not of interest. And it's interesting because in India, which I'm going to show you that intervention, we found similarly that it was more older women, 39, were attracted to this scheme. It definitely, for a lot of women, was kind of, as they were phasing out of sex work, it was something for them to do and start to think about themselves differently. High rates of recent homelessness in the past 3 months, high rates of incarceration. We were surprised with the low number that had children, and almost all had tested for HIV, and 10% reported being positive, which is quite high. and only a fifth had participated in a job training program. So as I mentioned, we were interested, I'm going to show you some of the jewelry outcomes, but in terms of looking at changes from baseline to 6-month follow-up in key indicators of risk, a big significant reduction in selling drugs, in injection drug use for the women that reported injection drug use at baseline, for daily crack use for the women that reported crack use at baseline, daily crack use. The average number of sex trade partners decreased, and the inconsistent condom use increased, and the stars indicate that they were significant at 0.05. So we were really excited that women in a multivariate model, the more money you earned, the less likely you were to report sex trade partners. Ideally we would have had the more likely you were to use condom use. Condom, if anyone's ever analyzed any condom data, is very tricky and different types of partner, and not enough women reported condom use at baseline. So the risk reduction that was the most impacted were drugs and selling sex, actually the number of partners, in the presence of other variables. So this was kind of our multivariate model. We published this in AIDS Care. All right, so to talk about the sales, this is a table of our jewelry. 77% of the women sold at least one piece. And let me tell you, we learned a lot about design, not to put all the good beads out in one day. Definitely we would have been, we didn't want to tell people what to do. We wanted them to kind of come in touch with their inner artist. And I think if we had the opportunity to have scaled this up, we would have been a lot more controlling, and these are the models, and have people kind of collectively vote on the next models. We would have had a lot more quality control, because what we didn't want at sales is people giving us money or buying things because they actually just thought it was a great program, which people did buy jewelry because they thought it was a great program, but we wanted it to be something that we actually could scale up on a website, in stores, etc. We never accepted money from people if they just, a lot of people just wanted to donate, and that was not the purpose of this. There are plenty of organizations that you can donate to and that are tax deductible, but that was not the purpose of this program. In the 11 sales that we had, we earned $7,000. 6 were cohort sales, and then we sold at, as I showed you the picture under the viaduct downtown, the Sunday market. We sold at a community fair. We sold at the Visionary Art Museum, which is a great place in town that if you move here or you have time tomorrow, you should think about visiting. The Visionary Art Museum, which is right next to the hill that I showed you that pretty picture of, so it's in a nice part of town. And the median sold per person was $164. $164 doesn't seem like a lot of money necessarily. It's not enough really to change someone's entire life circumstances, move into a nicer apartment, get an apartment, etc., not be dependent on a man anymore. But the fact that these women, a lot of these women hadn't earned legal money in a very long time, and this is what I was stumbling over earlier, the meaning of this far outweighed the dollar amount. And let me try you. We tried to sell, bless you, that point to the study section who reviewed our next grant, that it wasn't about the actual cash. It was about the opportunity and the ideas that this sparked in women's mind. If you see that, so people sold, the range was $29 to $1,231. The woman who sold $1,231, where her name was Sissy, she was in our, I never heard that ring. She was in our first cohort and just took to jewelry making like nobody's business. There actually was a really interesting film made about her. After the intervention was over, we gave her the beads, and she started an organization called GEMS, Gifts Encouraging and Motivating Sisters, and that we were in the process of incorporating. Unfortunately, she got sick and passed away a few years after working on this, but it was really an amazing, this project continued. She trained women in her house in Southwest Baltimore. We had classes, continued through someone. So, that is just to say that research doesn't always stay completely devoid from reality. And you'll see in the next project, we also had a nonprofit selling kind of component, but the goal of this was to make it sustainable and to make it something besides just a research project funded by the NIH. All right, so, this study demonstrated, I'll tell you, it's still the only economic development microenterprise intervention in the U.S. Caitlin Kennedy, recently there was a review in AIDS and Behavior of looking at microenterprise as HIV prevention, and there were only 11 in the world, and 2 of them I've done. And there's only 1 in the US. There are lots of problems with microfinance and microenterprise, and if people are familiar with the Grameen literature, most of the health indicators that have been looked at are related to reproductive health, health and well-being, violence reduction, and it's a mixed literature, but it's still really interesting. I'm talking today to someone who's interested in doing a similar project called Bling in LA with gay men who have sex with men who are big in the ball scene. So they want to start training them to make various products for that. So we're going to talk about that. Hopefully we'll continue this concept. But for whatever reason, it's hard to do. It's hard in the US to actually have people earn enough money to live on, and that was why we never got a bigger grant. That, no one ever believed the study section, when you get your grants reviewed by your peers at the NIH, no one ever really believed that this was something that would be sustainable. But they did think that it would work in India. So that's what I'll talk to you about next. I really want to underscore it was not a job training program. One of the women who graduated went on to be an outreach worker. She was bilingual, Spanish for Healthcare for the Homeless, a great organization. Another woman who graduated worked for our very own Urban Institute and got her GED through that. Jewel really was a stepping stone that gave women the self-esteem and notion of self-worth to go on and do other things. Now, I just told you, and then Sissy was the third story. Those are the 3 most successful women that kept up with me after the study was over. There are plenty who just came, learned to make jewelry, got the $25 for being in the session, sold some jewelry, and then they were done with it. But we definitely know that it had its intended kind of impact on some women. So in 2007, this group called YRG Care, if anyone is familiar with AIDS in India, that was founded by Suniti Salanaman, who diagnosed the first HIV cases among sex workers in 1989. YRG Care is one of the biggest AIDS service organizations, from behavioral science and social and kind of health. They provide health insurance. They have a lot of behavioral research studies. Ken Mayer works very closely with them. They have health clinics that provide ART, really big clinical trials. They're a huge organization that does practice and research. And they were interested. They had heard about Jewel. They worked closely with my now chair, David Celentano. And so they were interested in this idea. They had a lot of sex workers in their various studies, and they wanted to do something. They wanted to have an intervention that targeted them. So I went over for a week with David, and we talked about what we could make, what would be of interest. So, as opposed to now, we would do things a little bit differently, but we didn't partner with existing organizations like that trained women in microfinance. We actually developed our own enterprises, so jewelry and now bags. And so what we decided on, like I said, the time was 2007. San Francisco had just voted to ban the use of plastic bags in the city, so we knew that this was something that was going to probably start to take off in the U.S. I like bags. Chennai has a big sewing industry, a big cotton industry, so we knew that if we started our first bag, you'll see pictures, was a tote meant to be used primarily at the grocery. We knew that there were lots of different bags that we could make, so it just seemed like a smart idea. Pai means bag in Tamil, so this actually is bag. So Chennai is in the very south of India. Has anyone ever worked in India, or Chennai specifically? Where have you worked? You work in Delhi. Very up north. Very different city. I love Delhi. I like Chennai. It's lots of traffic and it's very hot. The north is a little cooler much of the year. But anyway, so we were in the very south, just to show you where we were. And the goal of this study was to examine, very similar to Jewel, a female sex worker's ability to be trained in sewing and to produce sellable products, and to explore the effects on their economic well-being as well as sexual risk behavior. I will say that it was interesting and different because women were being trained in India and then selling products here. And we were worried, one of the pieces that seemed to be the biggest hook for women was actually selling jewelry and having all of this kind of positive energy and good responses come to them. And that was something that was going to happen in this kind of a scheme. We sent back stories, we sent back pictures of store displays, but it's not exactly the same. Although we started a cottage industry. This is pictures of women in our first one of our first cohorts with our industrial sewing machines, and then these are some examples of bags over time. I don't even have a picture of the original. The original totes are underneath. They were kind of square and in the shape of a grocery bag, and they were much heavier. We evolved to these very spiffy-looking totes at the bottom. That's a messenger bag in the middle, and that's a wine bag that we used. That was actually for a store in Baltimore. We produced wine bags were great because although we were competing with China and we paid women a living wage, so ours always cost more, you know, wine stores buy a couple hundred wine bags. So that was something we were happy that we found as a market. So women were, the way that the training went, they had this, this was a bigger study of 100 women. They were randomized, and I failed to mention that for Jewel, you know, there was no, it kind of was dictated, the study design was dictated by the small funding that we had. So we didn't have enough money to have a control condition. We just did baseline and pre-post, which is a fairly weak study design. But it gave enough indication that, you know, women, the results pointed all in the right direction. So it was a good first proof of concept study. So this study, women were actually randomized to one of two arms, 4 interactive HIV prevention sessions versus those same 4 interactive HIV prevention sessions, plus originally 40 hours of tailoring, but we found that wasn't enough, so 100 hours of tailoring. That design, I'll talk at the end, that obviously has limitations as well. You're with people for 8 hours, you're with people for 108 hours, right? So they're more likely to have better outcomes because you have, no matter what you're doing in those 100 hours. But we didn't have the money to do a matched attention control. And there's debate in the field about the usefulness of that actually. So in comparing 6-month changes at 6-month follow-up, looking at the control condition and the intervention, women in the intervention reported 33% more income a month, $105 compared to $79, and a great 40% reduction compared to the control in the money that they derive from sex work and their proportion of income from sex work, so relatively in raw number. And their average number of clients also were significantly less. Because it was just a pilot and we were kind of really focused on developing the business, we recruited women from the center-ish of town, and I don't know, you probably are familiar with Avahan, which was a $200 million Gates initiative that targeted states with high prevalence in injection drug users, men who have sex with men, and sex workers in India. And Chennai has really high rates of HIV among sex workers. And so Chennai was a place that Avahan had done a lot of peer outreach. And so we recruited women. That's a pretty relative, they already were relatively lower risk than in other places in India. And if we had recruited more systematically kind of further out from the center of town, which we propose to do in the next study. Does that all make sense? So, you know, often giving this talk, people are like, 7 clients a month, that's not that high, but that's part of why we think we didn't hit the riskiest women. All right, and similar to Jewel, in the presence of other variables, there were significant reductions. The women in the tailoring arm had a significantly lower number of sex partners, clients, compared to women in the control arm. Clients, not just sex partners. Okay, so this is a picture of a group of our women, and we and YRG both were interested in having this project be sustainable, both the research arm, because this was just, you know, 6 months, and also the bags. So we developed a nonprofit in the United States. We're a 501c3 called PI, the PI Foundation, and its mission was to sell the bags and also the mission of our philosophy around training women and doing economic development, targeting low-income women. Every one of our bags had this in it, which reads this label. This bag was handmade by women in Chennai, India, part of the PI Project. The PI Project provides economic empowerment to vulnerable women in southern India. Bags are made with untreated cotton in the most ethical environment. All profits from bag sales go directly to the women involved in the project. Your support is greatly appreciated. And then we had a website where we sold bags. So the goal was, we wanted to have the selling arm, which had to be separate. I mean, you can't have a grant that kind of is paying to somebody to make a product. So we had our nonprofit foundation, and then NIH funding was the goal for the research. And then we had the Women YRG Care. We were doing training in India. So we really wanted to have those 3 arms in place. We thought that was really important. We decided we didn't want to say sex workers. We just said vulnerable populations because they are a vulnerable population, and we thought that we were going to be expanding this to other women as well. So to talk a little bit about pie and the sustainability, we sold 12 to 15,000 bags, but I always kind of am conservative. This is in a sports store actually in San Francisco, a display of our original totes that kind of look more like grocery bags. We had 5 full-time and 12 casual employees over a period of 3 years after the pilot done, so women from the pilot. Women who had been in the control were also provided the opportunity for training. We received, during this time period, an R01 to scale up to do a proper randomized trial for 500 women, half of whom were going to get HIV prevention, financial management training, 100 hours of tailoring, half of whom who would get HIV prevention and 100 hours of English lessons. So then we had a matched control. Unfortunately, it was a time in India where a lot of grants were not getting through the National AIDS Control Organization, and so we literally got a fantastic score on this grant, and we were one of the studies that never ended up getting funded. The head of the NIH, the embassy was involved, et cetera, and after 2 years, this was one of the studies that they never approved. They said that there wasn't a problem of HIV among sex workers in India anymore, which really, I don't really understand the politics of this. That is definitely not true. And that it was too expensive, which of course makes no sense because of course it was expensive. It was a randomized control trial. We actually had a cost effectiveness arm to try to understand how much it costs per case of HIV averted. So we were very sorry that it didn't continue. Production still continues in India on a much more modest level, and I now am talking to colleagues in Malaysia. We're putting in a grant later this year to actually do a similar scheme with sex workers in Malaysia, taking all of it, which has high number of sex workers and high rates of HIV and STIs, taking all the lessons that we learned from these 2 studies. All right. So the overall conclusions from these 2 studies are that women are interested in learning new skills and they're willing to work hard. 100 hours of training, we paid them, but still, most women, the average hours that they attended were like 91 hours, and that's pretty impressive. Granted, they were paid a living wage, and they were paid for all the bags that they produced. We also had a health insurance scheme, which for US dollars was not that expensive, but to cover women and their families if they didn't have insurance. Interventions that address poverties are well received by participants. It's a win-win situation because for us, the trick was to get the funding institutes to believe that this was actually HIV prevention. So our goals were met because women were really interested. And yes, it was HIV prevention, but it also was lots of other prevention in their life. Food instability prevention, lack of school fee prevention. So there were lots of ways that this benefited the women. And it really spoke to the importance of structural interventions that can have long-lasting impacts. So I think that's it. That's not my slide, that's theirs. I'm like, I don't have a slide like that. That's another peer. Does anyone have any questions? Yeah. Training? Yeah, more sociological or? So I am a professor in the Department of Epidemiology and have been there for 14 years. I was trained in, how many people are applying to Epi? Where's Jennifer, by the way? Hi. How many people HBS? So I was trained, I care about, how many Pop Fam? I always have Pop Fam students in this, interesting. Biostats, I'd be really impressed if anyone, good for you coming to this. All right, thank you. Well, you could be in Stan Fecker's more demography talk. So I was trained in HBS. My PhD was in HBS. My master's, as Leslie said, was from Chapel Hill in health behavior and health education. So I always am interested in kind of the more social context of health with, sometimes clinical outcomes. A study we're putting in now is actually looking at biological biomarkers of violence to see how that's related to women's receipt of HIV and STIs in a cohort of sex workers. So, but I work with other people who kind of do that lab work and are more clinically and biologically inclined. But that's my training.
Yeah, I'm interested because I guess I want to know how many professors kind of cross over using those methods, not research methodology.
It's not crossover. I am straight public health trained, so there's no crossover. Okay. Are you saying being versus versus what? Oh, well, I mean, I just happen, a lot of my work, I have more quantitative papers than qualitative papers. I mean, for me, I stumbled into qualitative methods because of the questions I was interested in asking, because it was a way that I got to hang out on our study vans and talk to people and do interviews in a way that I really got to know them. And that, which keeps you always well informed of what the next study questions are. I mean, never get far from your populations. If you're working in population-based research where original data is collected, I will just say to you, in your career, it's really important to kind of always be connected. Otherwise, you lose sight of what you're doing, and you get great research ideas when you actually talk to people that you're studying. So there's no crossover. This is part of public health. Yeah. Yes, yes, yes.
Methodological question.
Yeah.
It just seems to be, I know that one of your outcomes was economic success functionally. How did you operationalize that and ultimately isolate it as a covariate?
So I actually, if you look at the aims, I didn't say that economic, but we really focused on the sexual risk in that study. For PI, we did a much better job of asking all their sources of income and how much money they earned a month, et cetera. Yeah, so I didn't present that, and I don't.
It just seems like as a possible compound, just sitting and being in a circle and talking about risk factors and being a sex worker could
How that would confound what?
It just seems like, I don't know if that was as a possible outcome. Did you look at just the kind of mental health benefits of being in a...
Yeah, oh, okay, so mental health, yes. Women had, so two things I didn't talk about. We looked at general self-efficacy, and we also developed a job self-efficacy, we also developed a job self-efficacy. Actually, one of Bandura's doctoral students is a mentor of mine, and she helped me, who's the man who developed the concept of self-efficacy and social cognitive theory. So we developed this job self-efficacy scale, and we saw significant changes in women's ability to believe that they actually could get a job, hold a job, call in if they were sick, etc. Other questions? Yeah. Good question. Well, that job training programs should be funded in public health. I mean, that's a big message. We actually just put in a grant targeting different population, African American young women who are GED in GED programs. African American 18 to 25-year-olds have the highest rates of STIs in Baltimore. And the intervention is job preparedness training, a curriculum that was developed in Baltimore, and gender empowerment. Versus a control that actually is basic HIV prevention information, because there have been a lot of work showing that single sessions are efficacious. So, that could have policy implications for job training programs, that they actually look at health outcomes. Or, it's just like all the work that's looked at housing stability as protective from HIV incidents and transmissions. So then all of a sudden housing is brought into the fold as a part of your toolbox for HIV prevention. So that's how.
My second question was more out of curiosity, why do you think that the funding sources saw more of a value in advancement programs in India?
Because the average of $105 a month in India goes much further. I mean, that's what people get paid. That's what a house cleaner gets paid a month, or a driver. So it goes a lot further. We really couldn't I was a better grant writer by then, to be honest, but we couldn't, not that much better, it was only like a year later. We just couldn't convince the study section that with the value of, $164, or we had a reduction. I think it was average daily amount spent on drugs. It was like $54 average daily amount spent on drugs to $44. So it was like a $12 reduction, and people thought, well, when you live on $200 a month, these numbers actually count a lot. So, yes, also much higher HIV over there. We actually had an HIV outcome. Yeah. General trends.
Yeah, and specifically not being a sex worker anymore, since you mentioned that the women tended to build or perhaps transition.
So they were still sex workers. If you saw the number of partners reduced, everyone still, and when you think about sex work, there's a broad range of what that means. That could mean living with someone who pays your rent, to walking out on the street. So of course, because it was a small study, we measured as much, we controlled for the variables like baseline drug use that we thought were relevant to control for confounding. So we can't say exactly that it was involvement in the program, but it really changed the way people saw themselves. And yes, these women obviously wanted to reduce their drug use, but we felt that Jewel was a part of it, and every drug measure was significant and reduced. So, you know, a small study like that, it just points to indications, and it begs for a bigger, more rigorous study to answer the questions. We're over. Okay. Thank you all. I'll hang around if you have any more questions.
My name is Dina Wagner.
My name is Fumi Olaolorun.
My name is Adam Hoffberg.
I didn't know much about the city, and it was really fun to move here and learn about the different neighborhoods and explore what it has to offer.
I really do think that this is a great city where people are walking around, lots of people have their dogs, and it's really a comfortable, relaxed environment.
I think that the media that Baltimore gets is quite unfair because it is a great place to be.
So one of the great things about Baltimore is that they do make it bike accessible, and there's lots of places downtown that you can bike through, major roads and everything to get where you need to go, and a lot of students do bike to class.
I love the fact that there are many places that families can go and spend time together.
I think it really is a city of neighborhoods, and being able to do different activities on the weekends and try out different restaurants and stuff like that has been fun.
So one of the great things about Baltimore, it has a really thriving live music scene, and there's lots of local venues you can go see.
When I first started looking for apartments, it was all online, and I thought they were surely a scam. For what I was paying for a tiny, tiny one-bedroom in Boston, I could get a two-bedroom apartment here in Baltimore and pay less at that.
It's quite affordable. I have family living in New York, DC, and it's really significantly more expensive, and that makes it possible to use your money towards other activities that you might enjoy doing while you're in Baltimore.
It's a comfortable feeling I have to be able to focus on my studies and not worry what's happening to my son, because I know he's in good hands in school. I think everybody brings different things from their backgrounds, and it's really very useful to be able to learn from other students, because I think at Hopkins the students are as great a resource as the faculty themselves.
Who can beat Hopkins? You know, might as well go for number one, right?
As you can see, we're getting ready to kind of shift gears a little bit, talk a little bit about the city, get our students up here, and so you can ask some questions. I always say to our prospective and our admitted students, your greatest resource can sometimes be our current students, because they were in your shoes just a year or so ago. So we have a good session coming up next. I'd like to introduce our next presenter, Mindy Levin. She's the director and founder of SOURCE, which stands for our Student Outreach Resource Center. She's also a homegrown Baltimorean, and she is going to tell you a little bit about the city and, of course, what SOURCE has to offer.
Well, thank you, Leslie, and good morning, everyone. Okay, so as Leslie mentioned, I am born and raised here in Baltimore, and the work that I do through SOURCE with our team is all about Baltimore. So I'm going to first take some time to talk about our center, and then the rest of my presentation is going to be more about things to do in the city, living in the city, and then we'll bring up our panelists. So SOURCE, it is a community service and service learning center, not only for the School of Public Health, but also for the School of Medicine and School of Nursing, which are located right next to us. So we're a very interdisciplinary office. And really what we try to do is encourage our students to collaborate with different nonprofits and public health organizations that are right here in Baltimore City. So we only work with organizations in our own backyard. And so there's tons of reasons why we tell people you should really be working with organizations. For one, you're going to be learning a lot about theories in the classroom. We're going to give you an opportunity to apply those theories to a real-world setting and have a public health practice experience. I can also tell you with the nonprofits that SOURCE works with, they rely on our students to come in and help to support the mission of their organizations. Every year when it's like, you know, summertime in the fall and new students are coming in, they just can't wait to get you guys in their doors. This is also a great way to develop your career, to have more opportunities to put items on your resume and get real world experience. Out of curiosity, how many of you are from outside the state of Maryland? Okay, so that's a lot of you. So this, most of you actually, this will likely be your new home for a period of time. And so this is one of the great ways to learn your new community is to actually go out and explore. Now, Baltimore is not unlike other cities that you're going to find around the country. We have our own health challenges, diabetes, hypertension, obesity, substance abuse, and smoking. In the 2010 U.S. Census, we found that in the U.S., 15% of Americans were living below that federal poverty line. Well, in the surrounding area around our school of East Baltimore, that statistic is even more alarming. We have 29% of the residents that are living below that federal poverty line. So there's a lot of needs here in Baltimore. But in addition to those needs, we have incredible assets. Source partners with about 100 different nonprofits. These are just kind of some of the categories of organizations that you can get involved with. So if there's a particular health topic that you're interested in, or if there's a population that you're interested in serving, we likely have an organization within our network of 100 nonprofits. And you can feel free to take a look at our website and explore the directory and get a little flavor of what's going on here in Baltimore with those partners. Now, when I talk about Source, what I say is that the involvement opportunities that we have are really unlimited. We do everything from one-time things to opportunities that are completely embedded within academics. If you want to be a volunteer on your own, or if you want to have an internship that's for credit. Some of you might be coming for different degree programs, and sometimes you might be required to have an MPH practicum, or to have an MSPH field experience, or to go out and explore with the DRPH. And we, through Source, will connect you with some of these organizations. A lot of what we do is also supporting academic courses, where we're actually working with the faculty members that have kind of the goals and objectives for their courses, and we give you an opportunity to develop those skills out in the real world with some of our Source partner organizations. Now, I mentioned we are both a community service and service learning center. I think most people understand what community service is. You're doing some volunteerism. But not everybody understands what this pedagogy of service learning is. And I'll share with you the definition that we utilize, and that is that service learning is a very structured learning experience, and we're going to combine those kind of traditional community service elements with preparing you to do that work and doing some critical reflection. And when our students are engaging in these service learning experiences, you get to provide that service, but what you're doing is we're responding to community identified needs. Who knows best about what their communities need than the people that live here themselves? And the great thing is that you're going to have an opportunity to better understand the context of the environment that you're providing the service. So we've seen some tremendous benefits of having our students participate in service learning courses for yourselves and your own learning, but also it's kind of a reciprocal benefit back to the organizations. Now, I just wanted to share with you just a few of the service learning courses within the school that we've supported throughout the years. We have a flagship course that Source runs, which is our Baltimore Community Practicum course. And then you can just see here some of the flavors of the other things that we do, whether you're doing something related to a data analysis project and working with a nonprofit partner and utilizing their data set. We might be doing a health literacy project. We have students that develop what we call a photo novella, which is basically a comic book that shows a health promotion message that we develop with the community partners. We might even do some qualitative research. There's a qualitative research course series where students are learning how to do focus groups, key informant interviews, and we are taking the research questions that our partners have identified. So you are really applying those skills and making a difference outside of the classroom and in the real world. Another really cool program that Source has been offering is something called The Connection. And The Connection is our community consulting program. And it's kind of unique in that we take small teams of students, about 3 to 5 students per team, to work on short-term projects. And short-term projects are about 6 to 8 weeks long. And again, the partners identify projects that they would like, and students work on all different types of strategic consulting. We've helped to write grants for organizations. We've done all sorts of evaluation and assessment. We've done secondary data analysis, and the list goes on and on. So we've probably in the last 10 years completed somewhere around 80 different projects that have been requested by our community partners. It's a really great way to get your feet wet, work with others. These are interdisciplinary teams, so we have students from medicine, nursing, public health that are all working together with the community partners. Source has a lot of other opportunities that I'll kind of quickly mention to you. We run an HIV counseling and testing program. So each year we have students apply. We are able to train about 30 students to become certified in the state of Maryland to be an HIV counselor. And you end up working throughout the academic year with one of our participating community clinics as an HIV counselor. So you're doing that direct service. We also have a program called our Source Service Scholars, and this is another interdisciplinary cohort of students from medicine, nursing, and public health that apply to become service scholars, and they're going to be supporting the work of community organizations, and organizations have identified kind of activities that they are in need of. And each of the scholars is trained in service learning pedagogy, but also in volunteer recruitment and retention and how to lead reflection, because each scholar is then required to recruit other students to come and support and volunteer with their initiatives. And there's kind of ongoing training and advising that goes with that program. Then we also have our Source Service Learning Faculty and Community Fellows program. So in order for us to continue to grow the number of service learning courses that we offer through Source, we actually have to train more and more faculty members to be able to utilize the pedagogy. It's very much from a social justice lens. And so each year we have a cohort of both faculty members and community partners alike that are trained together. We help them to develop their syllabus. They basically get to understand kind of like the values behind service learning. And then we're able to bring you more courses where you can actually go out in the community and get that hands-on experience. I'll also mention that we have a small series of online modules. And these are things that we were developing with, again, community partners, faculty, students that are meant to prepare students to go out and work in the community. So if you've never done this type of work before, we have online modules about how Hopkins works with Baltimore, information about kind of like the competencies for community-based work, as well as skills that you might need and some kind of tips that we recommend that you take a look at. So that's something that people can look at any time. A lot of our service learning courses require students to kind of take those online modules. There's quizzes at the end before going out and working in the community. So it's part of the preparation process that we have for you all. Then we have slew of events throughout the year. In the fall, when everybody's here, we have our annual community involvement fair. All those community partners are here on campus recruiting you. It's a really exciting time. In early October, we also host Baltimore Week. As you could see from the people in the room that were from outside of Maryland, Baltimore is the new home for so many people. And we want people to understand the community and the wonderful things here in Baltimore. Again, born and raised here, I love the city. In the clip that we just showed, somebody had mentioned Baltimore can get a bad rep. We are way more than The Wire. Okay, so it's a wonderful place to be. We do tours of the community. We point out where all these nonprofits are. We host drives every single term, collecting cell phones, toiletries, yada, yada, yada. We're gearing up for National Volunteer Week. So in April every year, we have National Volunteer Week. We have awards that we give out, appreciation events for everybody that's been involved in the community as well. And some other things that we do, basically we collaborate with student groups on campus. So there are a ton of student groups here in the Bloomberg School of Public Health, but we also have student groups in nursing and medicine and tri-school groups. So there's lots of opportunities to go out and work with others kind of outside of the curriculum working in the community. So my final points that I want to make about Source is that we give you this opportunity to go outside of the classroom and apply those skills. I can tell you that the students that have been involved have rated their community involvement experiences as one of the best parts of their training. They've been able to develop tremendous relationships with other students, with faculty members that are working with them side by side on those service learning experiences, and then they're actually working with leaders here in Baltimore as well. If you're very interested in public health practice, there's no better way than to do public health practice than to get involved through Source. And I'll leave you with the fact that we have a lot of information available on our website, but we're also available to schedule one-on-one appointments with folks and talk about your interests, your dreams, your future career goals, and try to kind of be a matchmaker for you and figure out how we can get you involved. So one of the things that you can do if you're really interested in learning more about Source, you can do this right now. Feel free to pull out your smartphone, send an email to source@jhu.edu, and you can subscribe to what we call our Source Weekly Service Scoop. We send out a newsletter every Tuesday, just once a week, with all the latest happenings in the community and the ways to get involved. And of course, we're on social media, so if you're on Facebook or Twitter, Instagram, or LinkedIn, you can follow us there as well. One of the things that's exciting about Source is that this year marks our 10th anniversary of serving all 3 schools. So there's some celebrations that we're getting ready to have. So I'm sure if you follow us on social media, you'll learn more about that. All right, so let me kind of transition to the second half of what I want to talk to you about, and that's Baltimore, okay? So I'm going to talk a little bit about dialects because some words we say a little differently. Mention some famous Baltimoreans. We'll talk about transportation, entertainment, restaurants, living in Baltimore, and then by the time I'm done yapping, I will have 6 wonderful current students that all live in different neighborhoods in Baltimore to share more about their experiences with you. And then we open it up to Q&A so you guys can ask all you want. All right, so Balmorese, a lot of times people say, I'm from Baltimore, Maryland, because that's how we say it. It's Baltimore is correct, but if you're from Baltimore, you might say Baltimore, Maryland. And when we're talking about the fact that spring is coming, please, I mean, it is spring, we all start talking about when you going down the ocean, which means I'm going down to the ocean, Ocean City, Maryland. It's a popular resort destination that we have. It's about 2.5 hours from here. We might also start talking about I need to iron my clothes or wash my clothes. Ironing and washing, we tend to throw in extra R's. We're also getting really excited for them O's or the Oreos, which is the Baltimore Orioles. So 2 weeks from today, opening day for them Baltimore Orioles. Famous Baltimoreans, take a look here. Every year somebody's like, oh, you didn't put in this person. There's many more people. I'm just kind of giving you a little bit of flavor. Artists, politicians, athletes, musicians, the list goes on and on. So a lot of great people come out of Baltimore. This is where they're born and raised. Now, living in Baltimore, so we don't have a very extensive public transportation system. We have a good one, but this is not New York. But one of the great things about Hopkins is that we have a very elaborate and free shuttle system. So that free shuttle system takes you from our medical campus to the undergraduate Homewood campus. There's also another Eastern campus that we have a shuttle that goes back and forth to. We go to Mount Washington, we go to Green Spring Station, and then there's also an organization here in Baltimore which is called the Baltimore College Town Network. There's more than a dozen colleges and universities in Baltimore City, and then even more in the surrounding greater Baltimore area. So we have the College Town Shuttle that runs back and forth between different universities and goes to one of the malls out in the counties as well. So lots of places that you get to for free. Then we start talking about public transportation through the city. So we do have a metro, a light rail. Some of you might have come in on the train today through Amtrak and the MARC trains. We actually have a shuttle that goes from Baltimore Penn Station to campus. So if you have to commute anywhere there, you can then hop on the free Hopkins shuttle over here. Tons of bus lines, and you can get bus passes for monthly reduced rates. We also have something that's called the Charm City Circulator, and that's a free bus that goes around the city. I think there's about 4 or 5 different routes that go around downtown, and of course there's a route that comes right here at Hopkins. One of the great things about this campus is that Hopkins is one of the state's largest employers, so pretty much every public transportation comes right here. So you don't need to drive around town. If you want to live in a community that's near one of our shuttles or a bus or the circulator, you can get here very easily. We're not too far from BWI for flying in, and then just getting around the Inner Harbor, you can take the water taxis. We have Zip cars, we have Uber, we have Lyft, so you don't need to have a car. Now, entertainment. There's so much to do in Baltimore. Again, my list here is just going to start to touch on some of the things that there are to do around town. So if you're really interested in exploring galleries and museums, this is just a flavor of some that we have here. The American Vision Art Museum is on the top, and on the bottom this is a picture of the Reginald Lewis Museum of Maryland African American History and Culture, which is an absolutely wonderful museum that we have right downtown. Plenty to do in terms of theaters and concerts. You want to go see a live play, you want to see something that's off Broadway, you want to see some of our local performers. Again, tons of opportunities. There's more than this. I'm just giving you some opportunities and examples that we can touch on. So I'm a foodie. There are countless restaurants in Baltimore. Whether you are looking to just hang out in a coffee house, to go to the upscale, fancy places, we have every cuisine under the sun. One of the things that we talk about, this picture on the top here, is part of our municipal food markets that we have throughout Baltimore. We actually have a market that's about 2 blocks down the street on Monument, which is the Northeast Market, and you can go in there. There's all different stalls. You can get all the healthy food and salads, and you can get fried chicken and all the helpings that you need. You can buy socks there. You can buy flowers there. You can buy balloons. You can buy the most random assortment of stuff. So you have to check out the Northeast Market. We have a growing food truck scene. So the food trucks are really popular around town. We have lots of food truck gatherings. There's a lot of local breweries that are around town. Union Craft is our latest and greatest, and it's really cool to just check out the Baltimore dining scene. You'll learn a little bit more about all the different neighborhoods. I've listed some down here that are very popular related to some of the cuisines that we offer throughout our fine city. I mentioned the Orioles a little bit earlier, sports fanatics, okay? Baltimore, we live, breathe our sports. People that are from Baltimore, everything that we do is about our sports when we are in season, and you will notice that the whole city will be orange when it's the Orioles. The whole city will be purple when the Ravens are playing. You will walk into a supermarket and everybody will be wearing a jersey. You're not going to get that somewhere else. So we're very proud of our teams. We are proud of our East Division Baltimore champions from last year, and we're keeping our fingers crossed for this year. Now, what this also means is there's a lot of opportunities for you to play a sport as well. We have a lot of different city recreation councils that have opportunities to play sports, and a lot of our students end up forming teams. So whether it's like the MPH class is going to have a kickball team, you know, all that kind of good stuff. If you're interested in playing sports, I gave one of the other websites that you can check out that we have here in town as well. But, you know, it goes beyond just football and baseball. We have lacrosse, we have roller derby, lots of fun things that you can explore. The other great thing about Baltimore is where we are physically located. So if you were here for many years, there's so much to do right here in Baltimore that you really need to take time to explore the entire city. But it's also really easy to jump on over and do a day trip or a weekend trip to some of these wonderful places that are nearby. It's great that we're close to Annapolis, we're close to DC. One of the great things about the Bloomberg School is that we tend to have a lot of politicians that work with our faculty members. And so you have access to different leaders from around the state and local leaders that are really embedded in the fiber of our school. Now, people always want to know about where should I live? How am I going to find a place to live? And I'm not going to give you all those answers right now because our panelists are more than happy to give you those details. I know Leslie and the admissions team have given you that information and will continue to give information when you decide to come to Hopkins. But we do have a housing office that can help folks find housing. Our Gazette often puts out people that are looking for housing or have housing available within their homes or ready to sublease. Our newspaper is the Baltimore Sun. There's classifieds in there. Live Baltimore is an organization. I'd encourage you to check out their website because it has little profiles about all these neighborhoods. So oftentimes what I do with students is talk about what you're interested in, what kind of is your personality, because we are a city of neighborhoods that have very unique different pockets here and there. So sometimes they might say, you sound like you need to be living in Hamden. That's your spot, and we can kind of guide you that way. Baltimore College Town, that network that I mentioned of all the different colleges and universities in this area, they'll also have housing listings and people that are just looking to have student housing. So again, lots of different neighborhoods: Charles Village, Mount Vernon, Fells Point, Canton, Patterson Park, the list goes on. The reason why we're highlighting some of these is because that's where we tend to have large groups of students living. And oftentimes the reason for that is because it's along that Hopkins shuttle system. So they know I can live there, walk 1 block, and don't have to worry about parking at school. So it makes it really convenient. If you are coming to campus and Baltimore is a new community for you, there are some other resources that people are often in need of. If you are looking for a place to worship, we can help you connect to the appropriate location. If you're coming here and you have a family and you need to find out about daycare, childcare, schools, there's, again, a lot of information available. People are also very interested in the green spaces that we have around town. Again, with the whole springtime coming up, we want to go out biking and walking our dogs and swimming and all that kind of good stuff, so we can talk about the parks that are nearby, and there are some great places that you can explore right around campus. So with that, what I'm going to do is, I see some of my panelists are waiting in the wings, so I'm going to pull them up, have them come join me up on stage. All right, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I have a couple more panelists that will be hopefully joining us. Just for you guys to know, we are at the very start of the fourth and final term of the year. So our students are actually in classes right now. Some of you are coming directly from class to join us. What I'm going to have us do today is, as I mentioned, each panelist is coming from a different neighborhood. So I'm going to have them each briefly introduce themselves to you. They're going to share their name, degree program, as well as tell you what neighborhood they live in. I'm going to have you each describe the housing that you have, whether you're in a house or apartment by yourself, all that kind of good stuff, how many rooms, because people always ask that information. And then they're each going to talk a little bit about what they enjoy about their neighborhoods. So they're each kind of like the ambassadors to their neighborhoods, if you would. So, Bailey, maybe I'll have you start, just because I'm looking at you.
So this is on. Is this on? Yeah.
Should be on.
Good. Okay. So my name's Bailey. I'm a master's student in epidemiology. I live at 929, which is very, very close to here.
Oh, let me make one quick point. All right, so I have a quick map of the city up for you guys. What we talk about in the Baltimore city when we're talking about the east side, the west side, north and south, the picture here, this red line here is Charles Street, which was one of our main streets throughout the city. And Charles Street divides the city between the east side and the west side. And then we have Baltimore Street, and Baltimore Street divides the city between the north side and the south side. So a lot of times people, oh, you have a copy. That's fabulous. Mark it up. All right. So this little blue star here is the Bloomberg School of Public Health. And as Bailey mentioned, she lives at 929, which is basically middle
Underneath.
east.
Yeah.
Right there.
Yeah.
All right.
So every morning I walk about 2 blocks to school. If I forget something, I walk back. It is a 20-floor apartment building. I actually live on the 20th floor, so I have a nice view. I live in a 2-bedroom unit, and I was matched with someone that actually happens to be a student as well. Is that good for now?
That's good. What else do you love about?
What do I love about Middle East?
Sure.
I love Northeast Market. I get my produce from there. I'm a registered dietitian as well, so I give Northeast Market my nutrition thumbs up. I get lunch there as well, but it has really affordable produce because there's not a Safeway that's here. There's not anything within walking distance of here. It's really easy to get to grocery stores from the Charm City Circulator or another way, or if you drive. But I like to get my produce, at Northeast Market. It's from a farm that's relatively local, I think, Richardson Farms.
Yep. Great.
Hi, I'm Cheyenne. I'm in the MPH program. I live in Upper Fells, right there. It's about depending on how fast or slow or how late I am, it's about 10 to 15 minute walk. I live in a row home. It's a corner row home, so I live in an alley, which I think is really adorable. It's 3 floors, 3 rooms, 3.5 bath. I really like it. And I know you guys are probably going to ask this. Can we talk about rent?
Sure, yeah, that's a great
So I pay like $610. I don't know if that's good or bad.
That's great.
Okay. I like living in Upper Fells because I can walk everywhere. I try not to drive. I do have a car. I'm from a really small town, used to driving everywhere, and so now I love not driving. So yeah.
Great. Sarah.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarah. I'm in the MPH program, Social Behavioral Concentration. I am relatively unique in the MPH cohort because I actually lived in Baltimore prior to starting the program, then moved to Chicago, and now moved back to Baltimore because I loved it so much. So I used to live on the west side. I used to be a west side girl and worked over at a hospital over there. Now I've moved to the east side. When I first moved back here, I lived in Fells Point, but I moved back with the thought of potentially staying here long term, and it's panned out that I bought a house in Butcher's Hill. So that's pretty close to school, just a little bit above Shea. And I just settled in there in January, and am absolutely loving the neighborhood. I think that what's really amazed me most about it is its kind of continued capacity to surprise me for the better. I've had a group of teenage boys invite me to play pick up hoops with them when I've walked by. I had my my front walk was shoveled the first week that I moved in. We had snow, and I came outside, didn't even have a shovel yet, and my walk was already cleared away. And still don't know who did that, but it was really nice. And I've been meeting neighbors little by little and really settling into the community. Of course, I'm in a little bit of a unique situation because I am staying here and setting up shop for good in Baltimore. But regardless, I'd say definitely advice to think about is finding a place where you feel like you do want to connect with your neighbors. Don't just be kind of a student passing through, even if you're only going to be here for a year. It really makes a difference to find a place that you're comfortable and that you want to be out and about. Baltimore is called Stoop City. You want to be out on your stoop. You want to be meeting people. So find a place where you feel like you can do that.
Hi everyone, my name is Acadia and I'm also in the MPH program, full-time MPH program. And I actually live in Mount Vernon. And it's about an 8-minute shuttle ride from the shuttle stop in Mount Vernon, which is by the Peabody School. And I live in a row house, but I live in a studio apartment within the row house there. And I love Mount Vernon. So I love to talk about all the coffee shops there. So if you're someone who needs another environment that's kind of loud and bustling and open late, we have coffee shops up until 3 a.m. every day in Mount Vernon. Only one, but we have other coffee shops open a little bit before then. In our whole schools there, yes. And we also have a farmer's market in the warmer months, and there are grocery stores nearby. And I'm also a really short walk to Penn Station, which is great because if I need to go to the airport or if I need to go to DC, it's just an 8-minute walk for me, and I could even carry my luggage. Yeah, I love it.
Great. All right, so what I'm going to do now, I'm actually going to turn it over to all of you to ask the questions that you have. Now, you might already know that we are recording this for folks that were not able to join us in person. So therefore, when you ask your question, I'm going to repeat it for the sake of the listening audience. Panelists, we don't need to have everybody answer every question, okay? As long as we feel like we've had an adequate response to the question, we're good, and we'll move on. So with that, what questions do you have for us about living in Baltimore? I'll start way in the back, please.
Hi, so my question is about, just living costs in general, groceries, things of that nature. How much would you expect that you pay, I guess, weekly or monthly?
Okay, so repeating the question, doing as I'm told. All right, so the question is about living costs here in Baltimore. How much do you think you typically pay either in a week or a month, thinking about groceries, maybe gas and electric, those kind of things? All right.
I can start. So groceries, I like to weekly shop, so I spend about $30 to $50, 30 to 40. My roommate likes really good food and fruit in the winter, and so he spends like 100 to 150 a week. I think that's pretty extravagant. And then I guess a downside, I don't pay a lot for rent, but I pay a lot in electric. So in the winter, it's about $300 a month. But that, I think that's on the high end. I do, like I said, I'm on a corner house, so I'm not insulated as well. And then in the summer, it's like $150.
So I live at 929, a 2-bedroom unit. I pay $900 a month. That's including everything: cable, Wi-Fi, utilities, plus other amenities that you can see on their website. In groceries, I would say that I pay, every time I go get produce at Northeast Market, I pay maybe $20, and that's in season. And then otherwise, it probably ends up being around $70. Compared to other places I've lived, like Ithaca, New York, and stuff like that, it's definitely not as expensive, and neither is gas. I don't have a car, but yeah.
Yeah, I think that it's good to think about most of you, coming from different places to Baltimore. It's cheaper than a lot of places. I was in Chicago for a while, and from New England, definitely cheaper than all my friends that live in the Northeast. I feel like it's kind of, rent is still catching up to like the market rate up in northern cities, even in like Philly and DC, for sure cheaper than DC. A thing that I like to think about, I'm being recorded, probably shouldn't say it, but cost of like a drink at a bar is cheaper than any other city that I've lived in. And groceries are pretty standard. Gas is cheaper than I'm used to. And I think that in terms of thinking about budgeting, it's definitely good just to think about the fluctuation in the wintertime. You're going to be paying if you're in a house, especially these row houses are old, they're you know, the wind's blowing through the windows sometimes. But Baltimore's not a super cold winter per se compared to, again, a little bit further north. So that's just some things to think about, not like hard numbers, but.
All right, I'll take another question. How about that? Who else? Right here, please. How much in advance does it take to secure housing, and what do you guys recommend about how far in advance to find your place to live when you're moving here to Baltimore?
So in undergrad, we signed a year in advance, which is pretty extreme. Here, if you go on Craigslist, because I'm moving next year, and so I've been looking at a lot of these neighborhoods that they live in, and I would say that everything is either available now or within like 2 or 3 months, so you can't go much beyond that. For apartments, you can lease way more in advance. Like when I came to Admitted Students Day, a few weeks later, I signed at 929. So it's different with apartments.
Houses, I'd say, are definitely a pretty quick turnaround. So I had a housing option that I thought was kind of in place, and then it fell through. It just didn't quite work out, and that happened at the end of April, and I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to be scrambling. I need a place on June 1, and I found a place 2 weeks later for a June 1 move-in. So it's definitely, again, I think in other, like, I know from Chicago, where we're both from, the market is pretty oversaturated, and you have to kind of be really ahead of the curve in terms of getting a lease signed. But if you decide that you're coming here for sure and start looking at the end of April, you're going to be fine to find a summer move-in, I think. There were other house people.
I would say just came like in mid-May, just like for a couple of days with my sister, and just looked on Craigslist, and also that list that goes out. I'm not sure if everyone has access to it, but we put down like all the previous students who are leaving in their apartments and how much they pay, and I contacted some people through there too. So Craigslist and that list that goes from the school, and it took me about a month. I mean, like I found a place and then I moved in a month.
One other thing I just thought of, Craigslist is awesome here. I feel like it has different vibes in every city. I've used Craigslist 3 times in Baltimore and had great success. So, and most of my friends that have, not necessarily MPH people, but other people that everyone, I feel like it's a pretty common thing here. So don't be nervous about it.
I suggest padmapper.com as well. It'll link in Craigslist, and it gives you like a cool map, and you can favorite, and you can do all that.
Cool. What other questions you have on the end over here? Can anybody speak to what Patterson Park is like? I think so. We've got 2 people that live around the park.
I love Patterson Park. I always say it's the Central Park of Baltimore, and then my friends in New York are like, I don't know about that when they come visit, and I bring them there. But it's really great. If you're a runner or a walker or just like to be outside, it is really a nice little spot in the city that you can duck away and just enjoy wandering around. My favorite spot in the entire city, write this down if you're moving here, is on the far east side of Patterson Park, like Robinson Street, right where the furthest bound of it on the map, all the way over there, the little part that juts out. If you catch the sunset from over there, you can see the whole city skyline, and the park is rolling out below you, and it's beautiful. I run there all the time. I've biked through there a lot, and I cut through there a lot to get down to Canton, which is where a lot of restaurants and bars and stores and things are. It's a great asset to the city, and particularly to the east side.
And I can walk there from school. That's definitely walkable.
Great. Other questions in the middle right here. Okay, so the question is, what are your perceptions of the safety of your neighborhoods and you walking around in the neighborhoods? One thing that I'll just quickly mention is that, of course, we're a city of neighborhoods, and we're kind of highlighting neighborhoods where students tend to live. I wouldn't say that anywhere in particular is unsafe. You are in a city, so you have to have kind of your street smarts, because anything can happen anywhere. But there's kind of like common tips that we might utilize about being around by yourself at nighttime. So what are your perceptions of that from your experiences here?
So I walk home from the school to home, and in the beginning I was afraid to walk at dark because of, I watch The Wire and stuff. And then now I walk home at night from school and I feel fine. And I feel completely safe in where I live and walking around. But like, I don't carry my cell phone out and look at it so that I'm ignoring my surroundings. So there's little things like that.
And just to speak a little bit about Mount Vernon, where I'm from too. So I told you about that coffee shop that's open really late. So I walk by myself after midnight plenty of times. And I would totally recommend before moving here, just like going to the neighborhood you're interested in and just like going out to the restaurant, seeing what it's like at night and just like getting a vibe, because this is a place where you're going to live for a year, right? So you want to make sure that, you know, your personality, you know, fits in with the personality of the neighborhood. And they're all great.
I think another thing that's really important to think about is that safety is not necessarily a pre-existing condition of a neighborhood. It's what you make it. If you know your neighbors and you say hi to them and you are part of your community, you go to a neighborhood meeting once in a while, you stop in a corner store that maybe isn't a spot you gone to in your past or in other locations, that's going to make you feel like you belong in the neighborhood. I don't think that that you can, you know, we talk about it a lot in Baltimore, what neighborhoods you should or shouldn't be in, but it's really a matter of where you choose to put yourself and how you make yourself present to that community.
Sarah, I think that's a great point, because a lot of people that come to Baltimore are actually surprised when you're walking around the streets of Baltimore and people say hello to you and smile at you. I've had a lot of students that were from further up north that say, you just don't stop and communicate with people. What's going on? And when I go out to our community organizations, it might be the first time you're going into a nonprofit and you go to like extend your hand to shake somebody's hand, they're gonna just embrace you with a hug. It's one of our nicknames is Charm City, because it is a very charming place to be. But people in the neighborhoods, as Sarah mentioned, when you get to know your neighbors, let's say you're living in a row house and it's a whole street of row houses and you know who lives where, and you might have a car here and people recognize the cars and they'll know, oh, you left your lights on. So talk to your neighbors. And we also talk about cars, not leaving stuff visible in your vehicles. One of the things that does happen in cities around the country and happens here in Baltimore is your car got broken into. Why? Because you left your cell phone sitting out or you left your GPS sitting out. So put things away. Don't leave your laptop in the back seat. Put it in the trunk. Put it in the house. So little tips like that. Bailey?
So as someone from the South, I can correspond with Mindy that living in Middle East, I'm walking up and down places that, I mean, at first glance, you might be surprised. And sometimes when I first moved here, people looked surprised to see me. But they talk to you. Everyone's really nice. And on another note, me and my friends like to go out in Fells Point. Like, we go to restaurants and stuff, and we'll walk back together at dark. I have walked back from there and from Canton a couple times by myself, and you just, like, be aware, you know?
I was just gonna comment. I'd probably say good morning 10 to 15 times every morning, especially walking near the hospital.
Yeah. Okay. What else do you want to ask us? Right here. So the question is, how convenient is it to take the shuttle from Penn Station here in Baltimore to the School of Public Health? Anybody use that often?
So I guess I'm the one who uses the shuttle the most here. And so there is a stop in Mount Vernon by the Peabody School and one by Penn Station. And I would say I'm halfway in between, so I could take either one. And I would say the shuttle is really consistent. That's how I get to school every day and back every day too. And it's supposed to be every 15 minutes, but in like during the express periods, like during rush hour when there's just a lot of traffic, you'll have even more shuttle options, especially that leave from Penn Station and go to school. So yeah, it's very easy to take it, and it's very consistent, reliable also.
Great. Others, right here, please.
Yeah, so I'm going to be commuting from DC, and clearly that's one of your situations, but I don't know if you have friends or classmates, colleagues that have done that, if they've shared their thoughts with you, if that's even doable.
Yep. So the question is, if you're coming and you're commuting from DC, I think we get that question every single visitor's day, so I know you guys have friends that are doing the commute.
So I can speak on behalf of two different people. One girl drives, gets a reverse commute, takes about an hour, and she thinks it's quicker to drive because where she's located, taking the metro, whatever it's called in DC, and then taking the light rail here, and then taking the shuttle here would be more than an hour. But other people who live closer to their starting point in DC do take the MARC, and it's about an hour as well.
There's a little kind of cohort among the MPHs, at least. There's a little band of DCers that all got to know each other very quickly, and they travel together, they study together on the train. Like it's pretty feasible to do that and to get to know people that you can be in partnership with on your journey.
I also know people that commute from Philly. They drive, and there's like 2 parking decks right here, so that's about an hour and a half.
Commuting from all over. I'm going to go to this half of the room, way in the back. Great. So the question is, she has 2 dogs. How pet friendly is Baltimore, especially with housing?
Mount Vernon and Patterson Park. I've been looking for housing everywhere, and those are the places I've consistently seen that dogs and cats are okay. Plus, Mount Vernon has green space, and obviously the Butchers Hill, Fells Point, that you have Patterson Park, and that actually has a dog park.
Other doggy lovers up here? There's obviously other parts around the city as well. So when you look around the waterfront, there's different communities along here. Again, a lot of our students will say, like, I live in Canton or Fells, down here near the water. There tends to be a lot of parks, and there's doggy parks as well. Federal Hill, which is on the other side of the water, there's Federal Hill Park is kind of a green area. You can kind of tell there's a nice park there. A lot of people have dogs and young families there as well.
I'm a doggy lover.
Doggy lover coming up.
I just wanted to add, I lived in Canton. Who asked that question? Okay, we can talk later too, but there's a ton of dogs, and I had a puppy, and she grew up here. Patterson Park is awesome. And like Minnie said, there's dog parks everywhere. The city's very dog friendly, so we can talk later.
Yeah, and Canton waterfront.
Yeah. All right, in back. Okay, so question a little bit off topic, talking specifically about the MPH program, doing an 11-month intensive program versus a 2-year program. MPHers, how you make it work?
So it is fast-paced because every month you either have midterms or finals, but I am graduating in like 8 weeks and I'm really excited. Part of me is like, oh, I want to come back and learn some more, but it's also nice to have it in a year. And I think you learn to schedule your time and you learn a system. And I feel comfortable with the fast pace.
Definitely. To echo that, I describe it as fast and furious. You're never sitting still. You're always doing something. But it's an amazing experience. It's well structured. You're well supported. It's not, you're not the first year giving this a try. People have been doing it for a while here, and surviving and happily thriving. I would definitely say, to just in terms of what this talk is about, you have to make time to be in Baltimore and be part of this community as well. It is very fast, and you have to choose how you're going to spend the free time that you have. So make sure to find a spot that you enjoy, to meet lots of people and get connected, because it is going to, I think we're all realizing now, oh my gosh, we have 7 weeks. We have to get to that restaurant. We have to get to that event, to Lith Hall, all these places, so make sure to think about it very intentionally from the beginning of what you want to experience here in Baltimore.
As a comparison, I'm an MHS student, and it's 2 years. Obviously we're also on the quarter system, but I pretty much take all my classes this first year. So for you that aren't doing the MPH, it's still pretty fast and furious. And then you do your thesis the second year versus they're doing their capstones at the same time.
One thing I'll point out about the panelists is that they are each involved in the Baltimore community. When I was talking to you about going out and working in the community and doing service learning courses, they each go above and beyond and have really embraced the entire academic experience, including service learning, community-based participatory research. So you can balance your time as well as have a social life and doing some public health practice while you're at it. Probably have a couple more questions, so keep asking. Great question. Actually, I'm going to invite one of my friends on stage. Steve Bezzetta is going to come up here, because I like to put him on the spot. He's in student affairs and one of the greatest guys you're going to find here. You are. Tell us about parking.
So there is a student parking garage. It's on the other side of the hospital. So it's a little bit of a walk, but there's a shuttle that runs. It's $55 a month. It's billed straight to your student account, so it's real convenient. You can join and quit anytime you want. Okay.
Is that a 24-hour garage?
It's not. So I think it closes at 11. Oh, is it a 24-hour garage? No, it's not. And on the weekends, the garages are free. So you can always park in any of the garages on the weekends.
And I think I'm the only panelist who has a car. I have a car, but I walk to school. I try not to use it that much. I use it more to get to the grocery store or run my running group that I run with on the other side of town, things like that. And in general, there's a lot of Baltimore's about split, I'd say, between areas that you can only park for 2 hours. So that's, kind of like zoned parking, or spots where, like in the more shopping and dining areas, like down in Fells Point, you have to pay to park a lot of times if you don't have a permit. But if you do have a car and you're down in a spot like Fells Point, Canton, you can buy for, I think, $40 a parking permit to park on the street, and then you never have to worry about that. $40 something like that?
For the year.
For the year, yeah, for the year. So you just get a permit, a sticker for the year. So, but if you're up in Butchers Hill, I don't know where the cutoff is, but does Patterson, somewhere around Upper Fells, it becomes unzoned, so you don't even have to have a permit on the street.
I park for free on the street.
Totally depends on the neighborhood. If you're living in an apartment or a high-rise apartment, you might have to pay monthly parking there. And all sorts of students do it, that they have a car or they don't have a car. Or I have a car, but I don't use it for school. I use it for things on the weekends or when I want to go somewhere else to explore. Yeah, great. Over here. Great. Okay, so the question is, can you repeat the name of your neighborhood and kind of describe the personality of that neighborhood? Cheyenne.
I live in Upper Fells, and the girls that I was moving in with described it as a mixed neighborhood. So there's families and students, and a variety of all sorts of people, and everyone's very friendly.
I live at 99 in Middle East, and I would say that around 99, it's very studious because those are students that want to live close. And then in the Middle East community, I would say it's just that. It's a community. There's people walking around, there's businesses, there's everything.
I can speak to a couple of the neighborhoods. I used to be down in Fells Point, right by the water, and Harbor East, which we haven't talked about either, but that's kind of a new. That's where J. Crew is, and
Anthropology.
Anthropology. Well Made. Yeah. They just got one of those. Is it Made Well? Whatever. I don't know. Obviously,
it's nice.
Lululemon, etc. But I was right on the edge of Fells Point and Harbor East. I would say that's kind of the most traditional, cosmopolitan area where it really feels like a city with kind of it's not that distinguishable from another city. You're going to find a lot of things you'd find anywhere else. And then now I'm up in Butchers Hill, and it's kind of the opposite. I would say that it's very vibrant and people-oriented in a way that, my friend was just down here from New York City, and she was like, I can't believe how much everyone, wants to, see each other on the street. Everyone waves when you walk by and wants to, pick up your package if it gets left out for a night and things like that. So it's very community oriented up there.
Again, my neighborhood's Mount Vernon. I would describe it as vibrant and historic and friendly, and there are always people out, and everybody's great. And I would totally also recommend whichever neighborhood again that you're living in, just to take that opportunity, because these months do move by really fast, just to explore, go to the different restaurants, try out places that you think people don't usually go to, and that's where I've had the best experiences and met the best kind of people.
Do you guys want to talk at all about other neighborhoods like Charles Village?
My best friend lives in Charles Village. I do. I take the shuttle to see her. It's really convenient. You just take the express up. Charles Village is right across from the undergrad campus, which is a great place to study, by the way. But it is there's a lot of undergrads, so you kind of feel transported back in time. But there's some really great like small like grocery stores, and there's like a Chipotle and a Barnes and Noble. And then off the main street, that's where some of the most beautiful row homes are. That and Butcher's Hill, I would say. And then there's also smaller homes that are off. I mean, how would you guys describe Charles Village? Quirky undergrad. Yeah.
And there's Hampton, which I don't know where on the map
A little
that is.
further up.
It's pretty farther north. A lot of older students that I know. Sorry, when I say older, I mean like in the 30s. Sorry. But I've heard it described as like hipster.
Can I just speak really quickly about Station North also? That's on
Station
Charles.
North, right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Charles and North, I'd also describe it as hipster, but they have all of these art galleries there, and it's like smaller, and they have this one bookstore called Red Emma's, and they have community meetings there, which is great. Like you could go and talk about just current issues and just get to talk to other people who live in the community about these really important issues that are taking place right now, which is really cool.
And one other thing, especially for those of you who are coming from other cities, Baltimore's small. Like we talk about these neighborhoods like they're really different, and like you can't get to one or the other. I mean, you can walk from Butcher's Hill to Federal Hill in like 30 minutes. Like that's two opposite sides of the city. And you can drive from one side of the city to the other at rush hour in about 20 minutes. Maybe a little longer, depending on the exact time of rush hour.
Yeah.
And there's a running path all along the harbor.
Yeah.
So what she just said, that's really awesome.
Yeah, it's very connected, so you don't have to think like that you can't hang out in the hipster area if you live in Fells Point.
Big arts and cultural scene. All right, I got the go-ahead for 2 more questions. Wow. All right, so 2 more questions. So these have to be good questions. We're judging you. Just teasing. Totally teasing. Hands went down. Right here. Great. So the question is, people that are working on dual degrees, particularly between 2 different schools. What did you say? School of Business School, and the Cary Business School in Harbor East.
So I do know that the B school classes start at 6, and so for the most part there isn't overlap. The School of Public Health does have some night classes, so you might have to make some choices, but the students usually take classes that end no later than 5:30, either walk or take the Charm City Circulator or an Uber.
Free Charm City Circulator goes from
Yes.
here to Harbor East.
And most of the students that I have quite a few MPH, MBA close friends, and most of them are concentrated in Fells Point because it's easy to get north in like 10 minutes if you jump on the circulator, and you can walk in 5 minutes to Cary.
We're going to take one more question, but note that we're going to be hanging out afterwards, so you can still grab us. So who's got that last one? I can talk about Federal Hill. I love me some Federal Hill. So, sports lady, I live right there and walk to Camden Yards and walk to my Ravens Stadium. Nothing better in the world. Lots of row houses, so a lot of people tend to rent a row house and find roommates or people that already are living there and they're looking for other people. A lot of people are looking for roommates. We have young professionals that are looking for roommates. And again, very big restaurant scene, lots of bars around there, but there's also lots of young families and young professionals. What about getting here? Getting from Federal here. Okay, so a couple things you could do. What I used to do was walk to the Inner Harbor, which was like 10 minutes, and then get on the Metro, and it was one stop to Johns Hopkins Hospital on the Metro, and then you get off and you have to walk down the street about 3 blocks. So that total commute door to door was about 25 minutes with some walking in there, which was always the easiest. Some people drive it and then pay $55 to park at the student parking here.
I know a nursing student who drives every day, and she coordinates carpooling with her friends and picks them up. And then another thing about the Metro, so the hospital Metro, that is where the Hopkins shuttle picks up, drops off. That's where the circulator goes. So that is like the little transportation hub here.
So again, state's largest employer, everything comes here. We're going to find a way to get around. So with that, if you all would join me in thanking our panelists for giving their time to chat. I know Leslie's going to have some more instructions for us.
I'm just kidding. All right, just bear with me for a couple minutes. I just want to go through some of the logistics for this afternoon. We are getting ready to go now have your departmental lunches. So I don't want to act like you don't know which degree program you're admitted to, but some people are still confused. So you are going to the department that you've been admitted to. If you're admitted to a Master's of Public Health program, that's our school-wide program. So lots of time people think they're admitted to an MPH in epidemiology, but you may be with the Department of Epidemiology doing one of our other master's programs. So just it's actually on your badge. We put it on there to help you out. I know you all know where you're going, but we did have some questions earlier, so I just wanted to clarify that. You're going to go back to Finestone where we had breakfast this morning. You're going to pick up a box lunch. They're wrapped sandwiches, and we have different options. And then there's also a little dressing that you can pick to put on your sandwiches as well. You're going to take that with you to your room location for your department lunch. You can see the list of the room locations. We have staff and signs that will help you find that area. Just know that there's an east and west side to the building. It's hard to explain over this, but know that the first digit is the level floor that you're going to for that room. Those who are in health policy and management, we have a student escort that's going to take you down to Hampton House, and you'll be meeting out here in front of that big screen that's called the Wall of Wonder. We do have some room changes. They're going to break up some of your groups into different rooms, so it's best if you can go there unless you decide to walk down by yourself. Mental health, the Department of Mental Health students, there's a room change for you. You're going to be in 188. We have a student escort that will take you down there as well, and you'll be meeting where you picked up your registration packets this morning. Ending times will vary, so some of you will be done in 2 hours, some of you will be done in an hour, so just know that you're going to be ending out and coming out of those at different times. We do have this afternoon, we have campus tours that will go throughout the building. We also put in your packet personal walking tours. If any of you have come on Fridays for our 3 o'clock tour, the campus tours are going to be the same, so you're welcome to join us again, but just know it's going to be about the same. We also be having an information fair, which is in the Anna Bacher room. Again, right out this room to the right, and then make a left. Again, we have signs up for that as well. That's where you can just meet with different student services offices and ask questions with admissions, financial aid, etc. We do, just so you know, if you have any follow-up questions, we do have virtual information fairs where we're doing student panels. We actually held the doctoral student panel just this past Wednesday. We'll be putting up an archived video recording of that presentation for you to view. Our master's student panel will be this coming Friday, and then MPH is also having a bunch of their own virtual sessions as well. So just know there's more resources to get connected. And last but not least, we're having a nice reception for y'all. From 4 to 6 p.m., it'll be out here in the Wall of Wonder area. We invite you to join us and stop by before you leave. We're expecting about 30 different staff and faculty and deans are going to be stopping by, so it's a great way to kind of unwind at the end of the day before you head home. So make sure you bring your visitor badge. That would be nice for us just to know who you are. We have a lot of students here that love free food as well, but we're holding the space for you. At 5:30 you can come in. So anyway, have a great day. We'll be up here if you have any other questions, and we look forward to hopefully seeing you in the spring or fall.